The scratching started at midnight. Ember froze mid-stir, her wooden spoon suspended over the pot of venison stew that had become her only comfort in 6 months of exile. The sound came again, deliberate, rhythmic. Nothing like the wind that howled through the Norwegian pines surrounding her warded cabin. Scratch, scratch, pause, scratch. Her wolf stirred for the first time in weeks, a drowsy rumble beneath her ribs that felt more like a dying ember than the inferno it once was. Since the rejection, her inner beast had retreated so deep that some mornings Ember wondered if she was still a shifter at all, or just a broken girl playing pretend in the wilderness. "Go away," she whispered to the door, though her voice barely carried across the small room. The scratching stopped. Relief flooded through her for exactly 3 seconds before a new sound replaced it. A whimper so raw and desperate, it bypassed her brain entirely and struck something ancient in her chest. Her wolf lurched upward like a drowning victim, breaching the surface. No. Absolutely not. Ember gripped the counter until her knuckles turned bone white. She knew better than to answer midnight calls in the deep woods, knew better than to trust anything that approached her sanctuary. Especially on a blood moon night, when the veil between savage and civil grew dangerously thin. The last time she'd trusted her instincts around pack wolves, she'd ended up publicly humiliated in front of 200 witnesses, her mate bond severed before it could fully form, her alpha's words still carved into her memory like scars. "I, Damon Blackthorne, reject you, Ember Ashford. You are not worthy to stand beside an alpha. You are not worthy of this pack. You are Omega, nothing more." The whimper came again, accompanied by a sound that made her blood freeze and boil simultaneously. 2 distinct voices, both male, both trembling with what could only be hypothermia or agony, maybe both. "Please." The word was barely human, scraped raw by cold and desperation. "Please." Freezing. Dying. Her hand moved toward the door handle before her conscious mind caught up. She jerked it back as if the wood had burned her. This was a trick. It had to be. Damon testing her resolve, or worse, pack enforcers sent to finish what the rejection started. Omegas who refused to submit to their new status didn't get second chances in the Frost Fang pack. They got disappeared. But her wolf was awake now, fully awake, clawing at her insides with a frenzy she hadn't felt since when? She'd never felt anything like this before. Not. Trick. Another voice, deeper, cracking on the syllables. "Ember, please, it's Reese. And Jackson." The names hit her like silver bullets. Reese. Jackson. The 2 beta wolves who'd stood at Damon's side during her rejection, who'd watched with unreadable expressions as she'd been dragged from pack lands and dumped at the territorial border with nothing but the clothes on her back and a warning never to return, who'd said nothing, done nothing, been nothing but beautiful statues bearing witness to her destruction. Why were they here? How did they even find her? And why did their voices make her wolf surge toward the door like it recognized something her human mind refused to acknowledge? What were Reese and Jackson really doing at her door? Why would the wolves who watched her exile now beg for her help? And what would happen if she opened that door and let her past come flooding back in? 6 months ago, Ember had believed in fate. She'd believed in the moon goddess's divine plan, in destined mates, in the sacred bond that was supposed to make all the pain of existing as an Omega worth enduring. She'd believed that when her 21st birthday came, and her wolf finally matured enough to recognize her mate, everything would change. She'd been right about the change part, just not in the way she'd imagined. The Frost Fang pack gathered for the spring awakening ceremony in the great clearing beneath the ancient oak. 200 wolves arranged in concentric circles according to rank, their excitement palpable in the crisp mountain air. Ember had stood in the outer ring with the other Omegas, her heart thundering so hard she thought it might crack her ribs. She'd felt it building all week, the restlessness, the heightened senses, the way her wolf paced and prowled beneath her skin like a caged creature counting down to freedom. And then Alpha Damon Blackthorne had stepped into the ceremonial circle, his midnight black wolf form rippling with power, and Ember's entire world had tilted sideways. The mate bond had snapped into place like a bear trap closing around her heart, immediate, agonizing, absolute. Golden threads of connection had blazed between them, visible in the supernatural half-light of the ceremony, and for one perfect moment, she'd seen recognition flash in his silver eyes. He'd known. He'd felt it too. Then his lip had curled back in disgust. "No," he'd said, his alpha voice carrying to every corner of the clearing. "This is a mistake. The goddess has erred." Ember had stood frozen while her new, fragile mate bond burned like acid in her veins. Around her, pack members had shifted uncomfortably. Mates were sacred. Rejecting a true mate just wasn't done. The consequences could be catastrophic for both parties. But Damon was alpha, and alphas didn't bond with omegas. It would be a humiliation, a weakening of the pack hierarchy, an upset to the natural order that had governed werewolf society for millennia. She'd barely registered Reese and Jackson standing behind their alpha, both in human form, both watching her with expressions she couldn't decipher through her shock. Later, she would replay that moment 1,000 times, searching their faces for what? Sympathy? Regret? The same inexplicable pull she'd felt standing near them? At the time, she'd had eyes only for Damon as he spoke the formal words that shattered her soul. The rejection ceremony had lasted less than 5 minutes. The agony had lasted days, her wolf howling in anguish, her body racked with fever as the severed bond cauterized itself into scar tissue. Pack healers had come and gone with pitying looks and useless herbs. Pack law said she could stay if she submitted to her omega role without question, accepted a forced mate of the alpha's choosing, and never spoke of what had happened. Ember had chosen exile instead. They'd given her 1 hour to gather her things. Damon had assigned Reese and Jackson to escort her to the border of final humiliation, being watched by the pack's most elite warriors as if she might turn rabid at any moment. Neither had spoken during the 2-hour walk. Neither had looked at her directly. And when they'd left her at the territorial marker and disappeared back into the forest, neither had looked back. She'd wandered for 3 weeks before she'd found the abandoned trapper's cabin tucked into a valley that smelled of no pack, claimed by no territory. The structure was half collapsed, the roof leaked, and animals had made homes in the corners, but it was hers. She'd spent 2 months making it livable, learning to hunt and fish and trap, teaching herself the ward work her grandmother had tried to show her before she'd died, protective circles that would alert her to any supernatural presence approaching. The wards had never triggered before tonight. Ember had built a life in this cabin. A small, lonely, safe life, where no one could hurt her because no one could reach her. She split her own firewood. She tanned her own leather. She talked to herself and the birds and occasionally her reluctant wolf, who mostly preferred to sulk in the depths of her psyche like a wounded animal. She'd learned to sleep without nightmares, to eat without tasting ash, to exist without the phantom ache of a bond that had been ripped away before it could fully form. She'd learned to survive. And now, on a blood moon night, when magic ran thick and dangerous through the forest, when her wards should have held against any intrusion, 2 wolves from her past were dying on her doorstep. Ember stared at the door as if she could see through it. Her wolf pressed against her consciousness, more alert than it had been in months, radiating an urgency that felt almost frantic. "They watched you break," she reminded herself. "They did nothing," but another voice whispered beneath that truth. What if they couldn't? What if there's more to the story? She'd spent 6 months building walls. 6 months, teaching herself that trust was a luxury omegas couldn't afford. 6 months learning to live with the permanent ache of rejection. Was she really going to tear all that down for 2 wolves who'd earned exactly nothing from her except maybe her resentment? The whimpering had stopped. The silence was somehow worse. The howl shattered the silence like a gunshot through glass. It wasn't the desperate whimpering from before. This was something primal. Something that bypassed every rational thought Ember had been clinging to and spoke directly to the wolf she'd been trying to keep sedated. The sound rolled through the night air, through the cabin walls, through her skin and bones, until it resonated in the hollow space behind her sternum, where her broken mate bond still ached. Her wolf didn't just stir. It erupted. Ember's legs buckled and she caught herself against the counter, gasping as her wolf surged forward with a force she hadn't experienced since before the rejection. Her vision sharpened until she could see individual dust motes floating in the firelight. Her hearing expanded until the crackling logs sounded like breaking branches. and she could distinguish 2 separate heartbeats outside her door. Both rapid, both weakening, both calling to something fundamental in her DNA. "No," she whispered, but her wolf wasn't listening anymore. Her hand reached for the door handle. She watched it move as if it belonged to someone else, as if her body had decided to mutiny against her mind's better judgment. The iron was cold against her palm. She'd blessed it with mountain ash and silver shavings to repel supernatural threats. It should have burned any wolf who touched it. It didn't burn her. The wards she'd spent months perfecting dissolved the moment she turned the handle, unraveling like smoke in wind. She should have been alarmed, should have questioned why protections that strong would simply yield, but her wolf was in control now, driving her forward with single-minded determination. The door swung open, and cold air rushed in, carrying with it the scent of pine and ice and blood, and something else. Something that made her wolf keen with recognition and hunger, and a territorial possessiveness that terrified her. 2 men lay collapsed across her threshold, half in and half out of the cabin, their bodies wreathed in frost that glittered silver under the blood moon's crimson light. They were barely conscious, their skin pale as death, their lips tinged blue. But even in their weakened state, even covered in ice and obviously dying, they were beautiful in that devastating way that high-ranking wolves always were, all sharp angles and coiled muscle and dangerous grace. Reese. Jackson. She'd know them anywhere, though she'd spent 6 months trying to forget their faces. Reese with his auburn hair now matted with frost, his strong jaw clenched against shivers he couldn't control, his hazel eyes currently glazed with hypothermia that had always seemed to see too much. He'd been Damon's strategic advisor, the one who planned patrol routes and negotiated with neighboring packs, the one whose intelligence made him valuable enough to sit at the Alpha's right hand despite not being blood family. And Jackson, broader and darker, his black hair frozen in spikes around his face, his olive skin ashen with cold, his dark eyes fighting to focus on her face with an intensity that would have made her step back if her wolf wasn't holding her in place. He was the pack's head enforcer, the one other wolves crossed the street to avoid, the one whose presence in a room made dominance-challenged males suddenly remember important business elsewhere. They'd been untouchable in the pack hierarchy. Powerful, respected, feared. Now they were dying on her doorstep, and her traitorous wolf was screaming at her to help them. "Ember." Reese's voice was barely audible, his breath coming out in white puffs that dissipated too quickly. "Please." "Not." "Trick." "Silver," Jackson managed, and the single word sent ice down her spine that had nothing to do with the temperature. "Poisoned." "With silver." Silver poisoning. The only thing that could bring down wolves of their caliber, and even then it would take a massive dose delivered directly into the bloodstream. This wasn't an accident. This was an assassination attempt. Her mind raced even as her body moved forward without conscious direction, her hands reaching for Reese's frost-covered arm. The moment her skin made contact, the world exploded. The mate bond didn't snap into place. It detonated like lightning striking the same spot twice, like every nerve ending in her body simultaneously catching fire. Golden threads erupted between them, blazing so bright she could see them with her physical eyes, not just her supernatural senses. But these threads were different from the ones that had connected her to Damon. Those had been singular, elegant, a one-way bridge between Alpha and Omega. These were a web, a network, threads connecting her to Reese, her to Jackson, Reese to Jackson, and all 3 of them together in a pattern she'd only read about in her grandmother's oldest books. A pattern that shouldn't be possible. A triad bond. A true 3-way mating. Ember jerked her hand back, but the damage was done, or the connection was made, depending on how she wanted to look at it. The threads remained, pulsing with golden light that seemed to grow stronger even as Reese and Jackson grew weaker. Through the bond, she could feel them now. Reese's sharp mind fracturing at the edges as the silver spread through his system, Jackson's fierce will fighting a losing battle against the poison, and underneath it all a desperate, aching longing directed at her that was so intense it stole her breath. They'd known. They'd both known. How long? The words came out harsh, accusatory. Her wolf snarled in her chest, torn between the instinct to protect her mates. Her mates. How was that even possible? and the very rational human need to understand what the hell was happening. Always, Jackson whispered, his eyes finally focusing on her face with devastating clarity. Since ceremony, we felt it, too. The world tilted. Ember's knees hit the wooden floor hard enough to bruise. What? Damon knew. Reese's words were slurring now, the silver working faster. Felt our bonds. To you. Couldn't let. Couldn't allow. Her mind struggled to process this. At the spring awakening ceremony, she'd felt the mate bond snap with Damon, clear and undeniable. But Reese and Jackson had been standing right behind him, close enough that she'd registered their presence but too distracted by Damon's rejection to pay attention to anything else. Had there been other threads forming that night? Connections she'd been too overwhelmed to notice? He rejected me to keep you away from me? Her voice sounded hollow even to her own ears. To keep us from claiming you. Jackson's hand moved in the frost, reaching toward her with fingers that barely trembled. Triad bonds. Threaten alpha. Power sharing. He couldn't allow it. Couldn't risk 3 wolves bonding together, creating a power structure that might challenge his authority. Especially if one of them was an Omega who, according to pack law, shouldn't have any power at all. So he'd rejected her himself, publicly and brutally, ensuring that she'd be too broken to notice if anyone else tried to form a bond with her. Then he'd exiled her, removing her from Packlands before Reese and Jackson could act on what they'd felt. And they'd let him. They'd escorted her to the border and walked away. You left me. The accusation burned in her throat, like the silver was burning through their veins. You felt the mate bond, and you just walked away. Alpha command, Reese gasped, his body convulsing with shivers. Couldn't fight. Direct order, Alpha command. The supernatural compulsion that forced lower-ranked wolves to obey their pack leader, turning them into puppets who couldn't resist, even if they wanted to. She'd forgotten about that Omegas were so low in the hierarchy that Alphas rarely bothered commanding them directly, preferring to let social pressure and physical intimidation do the work instead. But Reese and Jackson were betas, high enough to have free will in most circumstances but still bound by the Alpha's direct orders. If Damon had commanded them not to interfere, not to speak, not to claim her, they would have had no choice. Why now? She was still on her knees, frozen in indecision while her mates, she still couldn't process that died inches away. Why come here? Why risk this? Breaking free. Jackson's eyes were starting to glaze again. Been planning. Months. Tonight. Blood moon. Weekends. Alpha command. Got away. Came to you. But Damon. Reese's breathing was becoming labored. Found out. Sent enforcers, with silver rounds. Ambushed us, at border. They'd been shot. Silver bullets designed to kill wolves quickly and efficiently, probably laced with wolfsbane to prevent healing. They'd taken what should have been lethal wounds, and somehow dragged themselves through miles of frozen forest to reach her cabin, driven by a mate bond that shouldn't exist, and desperation that must have been building for 6 months. Through their connection, she felt the silver spreading, felt their wolves retreating deeper and deeper to protect their cores, felt their lives slipping away like water through her fingers. She had 3 choices. Hit subscribe if you believe Ember deserves wolves who'll fight for her, not ones who watched her suffer in silence. Because rejected mates like her need viewers who won't turn away when the story gets painful. Drop a like if her 6 months of isolation made your heart ache too. 1. Let them die. They'd watched her exile without fighting for her. And sure, maybe they'd had good reasons, but that didn't erase 6 months of suffering alone, didn't erase the hole in her chest where her first mate bond had been ripped out, didn't make her any less terrified of opening herself up to that kind of pain again. 2. Try to help them with mundane healing. Pull them inside, get them warm. Attempt to extract the silver with her limited medical knowledge. Probably fail and watch them die anyway, but at least she'd have tried. At least her conscience would be clear. 3. Accept the bond. Let it complete. Let the mating connection fully form, and hope that whatever supernatural power came from a triad bond would be enough to save them. Option 3 was insane. Completely insane. Mate bonds were permanent. There was no rejection ceremony for triads because they were so rare that most packs didn't even have protocols for them. If she accepted this bond, she'd be tied to Rhys and Jackson forever. Bound to wolves, she barely knew who'd already hurt her once, even if it hadn't been entirely their fault. Her wolf didn't care about logic. It was howling now, throwing itself against her ribcage, demanding she claim what was hers, demanding she save her mates regardless of the cost. "If I help you," she heard herself say, "what happens after? You expect me to just, what? Come back to the pack? Play happy family while Damon's still alpha?" Neither of them answered. Rhys's eyes had closed, and Jackson was struggling to keep his open, their heartbeats growing fainter through the bond. She was losing them. Ember made her decision before her rational mind could talk her out of it. She grabbed both of them, one hand on Rhys's frost-covered wrist, the other on Jackson's shoulder, and pulled. They were dead weight, their muscles unresponsive, but her wolf lent her strength she didn't normally possess, and she managed to drag them fully across the threshold into the cabin. The moment they were inside, the temperature seemed to rise 10 degrees, the fire flaring brighter in the hearth as if responding to some unspoken command. She kicked the door shut and heard the wards slam back into place, different now, changed by the new presence she'd allowed into her sanctuary. Rhys and Jackson lay tangled on her floor, their breathing shallow, frost melting off their skin in puddles that spread across the wooden planks. The silver bullets were still inside them. She could see the entry wounds now, black veins spreading from each puncture like poisonous spiderwebs. Through the bond, she felt the exact moment Rhys's wolf gave up, retreating so deep that she couldn't sense it anymore. Jackson's followed seconds later. They were dying. She'd pulled them inside, but it wasn't enough. They needed more, needed the full bond. He needed her to accept what the goddess was offering, even though it terrified her more than exile and rejection and 6 months of loneliness combined. Ember placed her hands over their hearts, feeling the weak, irregular beats beneath her palms. "Don't you dare die on my floor," she whispered. "I didn't survive 6 months alone just to watch you bleed out in my cabin." The golden threads pulsed brighter, responding to her proximity, to her touch, to the decision crystallizing in her chest like ice forming over a lake. She'd open the door. She'd let them in. Now she had to decide if she was brave enough or foolish enough to let them stay. Ember had learned basic field medicine from her grandmother, back when she'd thought her future might involve helping pack members during full moon runs or tending to hunting injuries. She'd never imagined she'd be using those skills to extract silver bullets from wolves who were supposed to be her mates, while her hands shook so badly she could barely hold the knife steady. "This is insane," she muttered, laying out supplies on the floor beside Rhys's unconscious form. "Completely insane. I should have left you outside. Should have let the forest take you. Should have—" Her wolf snarled, and the sound actually left her throat a low, warning growl that surprised her. She hadn't heard her own wolf vocalize in months. The creature had been so dormant, so deeply buried beneath layers of pain and survival instinct, that Ember had started to wonder if the rejection had damaged something fundamental. But now her wolf was awake and furious, and absolutely determined to save their mates, even if Ember's human mind was still trying to process the impossibility of having two. She cut away Rhys's shirt first, her grandmother's hunting knife slicing through the frozen fabric with practiced efficiency. His chest was a roadmap of scars, evidence of years spent enforcing pack law and defending territory, but the fresh wounds stood out like accusations. 3 entry points, all center mass, all perfectly placed to hit vital organs. Whoever had shot him had known exactly what they were doing. Black veins spread from each wound in fractal patterns, the silver poisoning working its way through his circulatory system like corrupted roots. His skin was ice cold, despite being inside now, his lips still tinged blue. His heartbeat so faint she had to press her ear against his chest to confirm it was still there. The moment her cheek touched his bare skin, heat exploded through the mate bond. Ember gasped and jerked back, but the damage was done or the connection was deepened, depending on perspective. The golden threads between them flared brilliant white, and suddenly she could feel everything. Not just his fading heartbeat, but the silver burning through his veins. His wolf's desperate retreat into the deepest part of his consciousness, his mind's fragmented thoughts that were mostly just her name repeated like a prayer. Ember, 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 please Ember. And underneath all of it, she felt something else. something that made her throat tight and her eyes burn with tears she refused to shed. She felt his love for her, raw and absolute and completely unearned, given freely despite the fact that they'd barely spoken, that she'd spent 6 months hating him, that she had every reason to let him die on her floor. He loved her the way wolves loved their mates, wholly, irrevocably, with a devotion that transcended logic or time or circumstance. It was terrifying. "Stop that," she whispered, pressing her palm over the worst wound. Her hand came away black with poisoned blood. "Stop feeling things at me. I can't think when you're But Rhys couldn't hear her. And even if he could, mate bonds didn't come with mute buttons. She was feeling what he felt, whether she wanted to or not, the connection growing stronger with every passing second. She forced herself to focus on the immediate problem. Silver bullets. 3 of them, lodged deep in muscle tissue, slowly killing him. She'd need to extract them before she could even think about healing the wounds. And extracting them would require... Her hands began to glow. Ember froze, staring at her palms as soft golden light emanated from her skin like she'd swallowed the sun. This wasn't normal. Wolves healed fast, but they didn't glow, didn't produce light from their bodies like some kind of supernatural lantern. Through the bond, she felt Rhys's wolf stir, drawn by the light like a moth to flame. What the hell? She turned her hands over, watching the glow intensify. It didn't hurt. If anything, it felt right, like her body was finally doing something it had been designed for but never had the chance to attempt. The light spread up her arms, across her chest, until she was luminous in the dim cabin. And where the light touched Rhys's wounds, the black veins began to recede. Ember's breath caught. She pressed both glowing hands against his chest and watched in amazement as the silver poisoning retreated from the light like shadows fleeing the dawn. The bullets themselves began to surface, pushed out by some force she didn't understand, rising through tissue and muscle, until they clinked onto the floor beside him. 3 misshapen pieces of silver that had been killing him moments ago. The wounds closed behind them. Not completely, but enough that he was no longer bleeding out on her floor. Rhys's heartbeat strengthened, his breathing deepened. Color began to return to his lips and his skin lost some of its deathly pallor. Through the bond, she felt his wolf creeping cautiously back toward consciousness, drawn by her light and the promise of healing. How am I doing this? She stared at her still glowing hands. Omegas can't, we don't have. You're not just Omega, Jackson rasped from behind her. Ember spun to find him watching her with eyes that were clearer than they'd been moments ago, consciousness clawing its way back despite the silver still poisoning his system. He'd propped himself up on one elbow, the movement obviously costing him enormous effort, frost still clinging to his dark hair. What are you talking about? She moved toward him, her hands still glowing, still radiating that strange golden light. Luna. The word came out reverent, awed. You're a Luna. That's why Damon rejected you. That's why he couldn't let us bond with you. He knew. Luna. The word hung in the air between them like a bomb waiting to detonate. Lunas were myth, legend. The kind of thing grandmothers told in stories around winter fires, powerful female wolves who could match or exceed alphas in strength, who could heal their pack members with a touch, who commanded loyalty not through dominance, but through an intrinsic rightness that made other wolves want to follow them. They appeared once in a generation if a pack was lucky, once in a century if they weren't. Ember had spent 21 years being told she was Omega, the lowest rank, the weakest designation, meant to submit and serve and bear strong children for more powerful wolves. She'd internalized that truth, built her identity around it, accepted the limitations it imposed. I can't be Luna, she said, but her glowing hands argued otherwise. I was tested. At birth. They said what you were at birth. Jackson's voice was getting stronger as her presence seemed to bolster him, the mate bond already working to sustain him even incomplete. Not what you'd become. Luna powers manifest at maturity, at the spring awakening, the ceremony. The moment her wolf had fully matured and recognized not one mate but 3. The moment everything had gone wrong, or the moment everything had tried to go right, and Damon had intervened. He felt it, she whispered, pieces clicking into place with sickening clarity. When the bond snapped between us, He felt that I wasn't just Omega anymore, and he felt our bonds forming. Jackson managed to push himself up to sitting, his dark eyes never leaving her face. A triad bond with a Luna at its center. It would have created a power structure that could challenge him, maybe even overthrow him. So he rejected me first. Bitterness coated her tongue like poison. Before I could realize what I was, before we could complete the triad, before you could become what you were always meant to be, Rhys murmured, and she turned to find him conscious now, hazel eyes tracking her with an intensity that made her pulse jump. Our Luna, our mate, our everything. The reverence in his voice made her want to run, made her want to stay, made her want to scream at the unfairness of finding her true mates only after she'd been broken by a false one. Don't, she said sharply, turning back to Jackson before she could do something stupid like cry or throw herself at Rhys, or accept a bond she still wasn't sure she wanted. Don't put me on a pedestal. Don't make me into something I'm not. We're not making you into anything. Jackson held out his hand, palm up, an offering. We're just seeing what was always there. She stared at his hand like it might bite her. The golden threads connecting them pulsed with want and need, and that same overwhelming love she'd felt from Rhys. Through the bond, she could sense Jackson's wolf now too, battered but alive, radiating protective, fierce devotion that should have been reserved for someone worthy of it. Someone who wasn't a broken Omega who'd spent 6 months hiding in the woods. Except she wasn't just Omega anymore. Maybe she never had been. You still need healing, she said, instead of addressing any of the enormity hanging between them. Let me finish this. She placed her glowing hands on Jackson's chest, feeling his sharp intake of breath as her light met his darkness. His wounds were worse than Rhys's 4 bullets instead of 3, and they'd been inside him longer, the silver poisoning spreading further. Black veins covered his torso like a net, designed to strangle his heart, but her light pushed it back. Slowly, methodically, like dawn breaking over mountains, she drove the silver from his system and watched the bullets surface and fall away. His wounds closed, his heartbeat strengthened. His wolf rose from the depths and pressed against his consciousness, reaching for her through the bond with desperate gratitude. By the time she finished, she was shaking with exhaustion, the glow fading from her skin until she was just ember again, confused and scared and surrounded by 2 male wolves who were looking at her like she'd hung the moon. Thank you. Rhys sat up slowly, testing his newly healed body. You saved our lives. I should have let you die, she said, but there was no heat behind it. Her wolf wouldn't have let her, and they all knew it. But you didn't. Jackson reached for her hand, and this time she let him take it, too tired to fight the mate bond's insistent pull. His fingers were warm now, no longer frozen, and the contact sent pleasant shivers up her arm. You let us in, you healed us, you felt the bond. I don't know what I felt. It was a lie, and everyone in the room knew it. Yes, you do. Rhys moved closer, careful not to crowd her but close enough that she could smell him pine and winter storms, and underneath it all, a scent that was uniquely his. Her wolf purred at the smell, the traitorous creature. You felt what we've been feeling for 6 months. The pull. The need. The certainty. Certainty? She laughed, the sound brittle. You're certain about the Omega who was rejected and exiled? The one who's been living alone in the woods like some kind of feral cat? That's who you want as your mate? Yes. They said it simultaneously, their voices harmonizing in a way that resonated through the bond. You're insane. Probably, Jackson agreed, his thumb stroking over her knuckles in a gesture that was simultaneously comforting and possessive. But we're your kind of insane. She wanted to argue, wanted to pull away, wanted to rebuild the walls she'd so carefully constructed over 6 months of survival. But she was so tired, tired of being alone, tired of fighting her wolf, tired of pretending that healing them hadn't felt more right than anything she'd done since the rejection. I can't go back to the pack, she said finally. I won't, not while Damon's still alpha. We're not asking you to. Rhys's voice was gentle. We came here to be with you, not to drag you back. Damon will come for you. She looked between them. When you don't return, when the enforcers report back that you got away, he'll come. And he'll bring the whole pack. Let him come. Jackson's eyes flashed gold, his wolf rising to the surface. We'll be ready. You'll be dead. She pulled her hand from his, standing on shaky legs. You might be betas, but Damon's pure alpha bloodline going back 6 generations. He'll crush you. He'll kill you. And then he'll kill me for helping you. Not if we complete the bond. Rhys stood too, moving with the fluid grace of a predator despite being half dead minutes ago. A triad bond with a Luna at its center that's power Damon can't match. That's why he was afraid of it. You don't know that I'm actually Luna. Even as she said it, she remembered the glow, the healing, the way the silver had retreated from her light. One healing doesn't make me. Look at yourself, Jackson said quietly. Ember glanced down and gasped. Her skin was glowing again, soft golden light pulsing in time with her heartbeat. And on her arms, just visible beneath the light, were marks she'd never seen before, intricate patterns like lace made of moonlight, spiraling from her wrists to her shoulders in designs that matched the Luna markings she'd only ever seen in her grandmother's oldest books. No, she whispered, but the evidence was literally written on her skin. This isn't I can't be. A howl split the night outside. Long, loud, and unmistakably commanding. An alpha's call, demanding submission and obedience. Damon had found them. Through the still open mate bond, Ember felt both Rhys and Jackson tense, their wolves responding instinctively to their alpha's summons even as they fought against it. The alpha command was pulling at them, trying to drag them back under Damon's control, trying to make them abandon her and return to their pack. No. Her voice came out as a growl, her wolf surging forward with protective fury. You're not going anywhere. She grabbed both their hands before she could second-guess the impulse. The moment their skin connected, power exploded through the cabin, her golden light flaring so bright that it illuminated the forest outside through the windows, so intense that she heard the wards around her sanctuary crack and reform into something stronger, something new. The alpha command shattered like glass against stone. Rhys and Jackson gasped simultaneously, their wolves breaking free from Damon's control as the mate bond reinforced, deepened, began to solidify into something permanent. Another howl came from outside, closer now, and this one was full of rage. Accept our bond, Rhys said urgently, squeezing her hand. Accept us by Blood Moon Peak, or we die. The silver's gone, but the damage we need the completed bond to fully heal. And you need us to face what's coming. But we won't force you, Jackson added, his dark eyes meeting hers with devastating sincerity. If you tell us to leave, if you want us gone, we'll go. We'll lead him away, give you a chance to run. The mate bond pulsed between them, golden threads growing brighter with every passing second. Outside, she could hear movement now, paws on snow, multiple wolves circling her cabin, and above it all, Damon's presence like a storm about to break. She had minutes, maybe less, to make a choice that would determine the rest of her life. Accept the bond and face Damon with her mates at her side, trusting in power she'd only just discovered and a connection she still barely understood. Or send them away and face the alpha who'd already destroyed her once, alone in a cabin that suddenly felt far too fragile to protect her from what was coming. Her wolf knew which choice it wanted, was howling the answer like a battle cry. The question was whether Ember was brave enough to listen. The cabin's windows exploded inward. Glass shattered in a crystalline rain that caught the blood moon's light and transformed the air into a storm of crimson fragments. Ember threw herself over Rhys and Jackson instinctively, her body moving before her mind could process the threat, her wolf roaring to the surface with a ferocity that would have shocked her 6 months ago. But she wasn't the same wolf she'd been 6 months ago. Golden light erupted from her skin, forming a barrier that caught the glass mid-flight and suspended it in the air like frozen time. She stared at the hovering shards, her hands still gripping Rhys and Jackson, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might crack her ribs. "Did I just?" she started. "Yes," Rhys breathed, awe coloring his voice. "Luna power, protective manifestation." The glass fell harmlessly to the floor, tinkling like broken wind chimes. Then, Damon Blackthorn stepped through the shattered window frame, and every instinct Ember possessed screamed at her to submit, to lower her eyes, to bare her throat in the automatic deference that Omegas showed to Alphas. Her wolf snarled and held her ground. He was exactly as she remembered, tall and commanding with silver eyes that glowed in the darkness. His midnight black hair pulled back to reveal the sharp angles of his face. Power radiated from him in waves that made the air feel thick and heavy. The supernatural weight of 6 generations of alpha bloodline pressing down on everything in his vicinity. He wore dark tactical gear that emphasized the lean muscle of a predator built for violence, and the smile on his face was the kind that preceded bloodshed. "There you are," he said, his voice carrying the resonance of alpha command even in casual conversation. "I've been looking everywhere for my wayward betas, and here I find them with the little Omega who should have learned her place by now." 4 more wolves entered behind him, enforcers in human form, all armed with silver-loaded weapons, all watching her with the cold assessment of soldiers who'd been given permission to kill. Ember's hands tightened on Reese and Jackson, feeling them tense beneath her grip. Through the bond, she could feel their wolves rising, preparing for a fight they couldn't win, ready to die protecting her because that's what mates did. She wouldn't let them. "Get out." Her voice came out steadier than she felt, carrying an authority she didn't know she possessed. "You're not welcome here." Damon laughed, a cold, calculated sound that held no humor. "I don't need your welcome, Ember. This isn't pack territory. Which means it's neutral ground, which means I can go wherever I please." His silver eyes dropped to where she still held Reese and Jackson's hands. "Though I see you've been busy making friends with my property. They're not property." The words came out as a growl, her wolf pressing against her consciousness with barely contained rage. "They're not yours." "Funny." Damon took a step closer, and Ember felt Reese and Jackson try to move in front of her, but she held them in place with strength that surprised all 3 of them. I distinctly remember them swearing oaths of loyalty to me. Blood oaths, the kind that bind beta wolves to their alpha for life. "Blood oaths mean nothing compared to mate bonds," Jackson said, his voice rough but defiant. "You know this, you've always known." "Ah, yes, the mate bond." Damon's smile widened, showing too many teeth. "The sacred connection that transcends all others, the divine gift from the moon goddess herself." He moved closer still, his presence filling the cabin like smoke. "Tell me, Ember, did they explain to you exactly what happened at your spring awakening? The full story?" "The full story?" Through the bond she felt Reese's flash of panic, Jackson's surge of protectiveness. But underneath it all was guilt. Deep, aching guilt that they'd been carrying for 6 months. "They told me enough," she said carefully. "Did they tell you that they felt the mate bond snap with you the same moment I did?" Damon's eyes glittered with malicious amusement. "That they knew you were their mate but said nothing?" "Did nothing. You commanded them," she started. "I commanded them after," Damon interrupted. "After I rejected you. After the bond between us broke and left you screaming on the ground. They stood there for a full minute. A full minute. Ember feeling their mate bonds with you solidify. Feeling your pain through the connection. And they did nothing." The words hit like physical blows. She turned to look at Reese and Jackson, searching their faces for denial, for explanation, for anything that would make this hurt less. Their expressions confirmed the truth. "We wanted to stop it," Reese said urgently, his hazel eyes pleading. "The moment Damon started the rejection ceremony, we tried to step forward, tried to claim you first, but you hesitated," Damon supplied helpfully. "Because claiming an Omega publicly, especially one bonded to your alpha, would have been social suicide. You would have been exiled, stripped of your ranks, made outcasts alongside her. So you watched," Ember said flatly, the betrayal cutting deeper than the rejection had. Damon had been a mate, chosen by fate, but one she barely knew. Reese and Jackson were wolves she'd admired from afar, respected, even harbored secret crushes on during pack gatherings. Finding out they'd felt the bond and hesitated even for a minute felt like being rejected all over again. "We were afraid," Jackson admitted, and the raw honesty in his voice made her chest ache. "We were cowards. We felt the bond, and we were terrified of what it would mean, what we'd lose, how the pack would react. And in that minute of fear, Damon completed his rejection, and you collapsed, and then it was too late. Too late because I commanded them to stay silent," Damon continued, clearly enjoying this. "Too late, because by the time they'd worked up the courage to act, you were already broken, already exiling yourself, already running from a pack that would never accept you as anything but Omega. Except she's not just Omega, is she? Rhys's voice cut through the tension like a blade. That's what you actually couldn't allow. You felt it the moment the bond snapped, felt that she was Luna, felt that her power could rival yours. Damon's smile finally slipped, replaced by something harder, more dangerous. Careful, Rhys. Why? Rhys stood, pulling Ember up with him, Jackson rising on her other side so that she was bracketed between them. We're already dead. You sent enforcers with silver bullets to kill us. The only reason we're alive is because our Luna healed us. You're Luna. Damon's voice dropped to a deadly whisper. She's not Luna. She's a confused Omega who healed you out of misplaced compassion. Nothing more. Then why are you here? Ember asked, finding her voice again despite the betrayal still churning in her gut. If I'm just a confused Omega, why bring 4 enforcers armed with silver? Why track them across pack territory in the middle of Blood Moon? Why risk being away from pack lands when every other alpha is consolidating power tonight? She saw the answer in his eyes before he spoke it. Because you're afraid, she continued, the pieces falling into place with devastating clarity. You rejected me to prevent the triad bond from forming. You exiled me to keep me away from Rhys and Jackson. And when they escaped tonight to find me, you panicked. I don't panic, Damon said coldly. You panicked, Jackson repeated. And through the bond, Ember felt his satisfaction at finally seeing their alpha rattled. Because you knew that if we completed the triad bond with a Luna at its center, your hold on the pack would shatter. 3 bonded wolves, one of them Luna, that's a power structure that could challenge you. That could overthrow you. More than challenge, Rhys added, his tactical mind clearly working through the implications. A Luna can call loyalty from pack members without dominance, without force. She can heal them, protect them, offer them something you never could, safety that doesn't come with the threat of violence. If Ember accepts us, if she becomes our Luna fully, every wolf in Frostfang will feel the pull of her power. They'll have a choice. Follow the alpha who rules through fear, or follow the Luna who leads through love. Damon's control finally cracked. His eyes flashed pure gold as his wolf surged to the surface, power rolling off him in waves that made the remaining glass in the window frames rattle and the wooden cabin walls groan. The enforcers behind him tensed, hands moving to their weapons. You think I'd allow that? His voice resonated with alpha command, the supernatural compulsion that could bring lesser wolves to their knees. You think I spent 6 months carefully dismantling any lingering loyalty to you in the pack, carefully explaining how you abandoned your Luna duties by running away, carefully positioning myself as the only thing standing between order and chaos. You think I'd let you waltz back in and undo everything? Wait. Ember's mind snagged on something in that angry confession. Luna duties. I never had Luna duties. I was Omega. Damon's expression shuddered, but it was too late. He'd revealed too much. You knew, she whispered, horror and fury warring in her chest. Before the spring awakening, you knew I was going to manifest as Luna. My father told me. The admission came out flat, matter of fact. Alpha bloodlines can sometimes sense Luna potential in unmated females. It's how historically we've ensured that Lunas bonded with alphas, maintaining proper pack hierarchy. He felt your potential when you turned 18, told me to watch you, to be ready to claim you when you matured. So you planned it. Her voice shook with rage. The public rejection, the humiliation. You planned all of it to break me before I could become a threat. I planned to protect my pack, Damon corrected. Luna power without alpha guidance is dangerous. You could have destabilized everything, especially if you'd bonded with not just 1 but 2 betas. A triad bond with you at the center would have created a competing power structure, civil war, pack division. I did what was necessary. You destroyed her, Jackson snarled, his wolf so close to the surface that his eyes were more gold than brown. You took a gift from the moon goddess and tried to crush it because you were afraid it would outshine you. I took a potential problem and neutralized it. Damon's smile returned, cold and cruel. And I did such a thorough job that even now, even knowing what you are, you still doubt yourself. Still think of yourself as rejected Omega rather than Luna. I broke something in you that night, Ember. Something that can't be healed by holding hands with lovesick betas. The words were designed to wound, and they did. Because he was right, even with the evidence of Luna power literally glowing on her skin, even with the mate bond thrumming between her and Reese and Jackson, part of her still felt like that shattered girl, being dragged to the border and thrown away like garbage. You're right, she said quietly, and felt both Reese and Jackson tense beside her. You did break something in me. You took a young wolf who believed in fate and destiny and the goodness of her pack, and you shattered every one of those beliefs. She took a step forward, and to her satisfaction, one of the enforcers actually stepped back. But broken things can be reforged stronger. Broken bones heal denser. Broken hearts build better walls. And broken Omegas who are actually Lunas. She felt her power rising, the golden light spreading across her skin like dawn breaking. They learn to survive. They learn to fight. They learn that the only wolves worth trusting are the ones who follow them through hell and back. The Luna markings on her arms began to glow, intricate patterns brightening, until they cast shadows across the cabin walls. Behind her, she felt Reese and Jackson's wolves rising in response to hers, their power feeding into the incomplete bond and amplifying it. You can't complete the bond, Damon said, but she heard the uncertainty in his voice now. It's past midnight. Blood moon peaks at 1 a.m. You have less than an hour, and I'm not going anywhere. Then watch, Ember said. Watch what you tried to destroy become something you can't control. She turned to Reese and Jackson, looking at them properly for the first time since Damon's revelations. They'd hesitated at her spring awakening. They'd watched her be rejected and exiled. They'd been cowards when she'd needed them to be brave. But they'd also spent 6 months planning an escape. They'd risked execution to find her. They'd taken silver bullets meant to kill them, and dragged themselves through miles of frozen forest just to reach her door. They'd apologized. They'd been honest about their failures, and through the bond, she could feel the truth of their feelings. The love, the devotion, the desperate need to make amends for that 1 minute of hesitation that had cost all 3 of them 6 months of pain. She was still angry, still hurt, still working through layers of betrayal that would take time to fully process. But her wolf knew what it wanted. And maybe, just this once, she should trust her wolf. Tell me something, she said, looking between her 2 mates. If we complete this bond, if I accept you fully, what happens then? What are you offering me besides protection and pretty words? Everything, Reese said immediately. Everything we are, everything we have, our loyalty, our lives, our wolves. We'll spend every day earning your trust, proving we're worthy of the gift you're giving us. We'll fight for you, Jackson added, his dark eyes intense. We'll protect you. We'll stand between you and anyone who tries to hurt you, even if it means dying in the process. We'll never hesitate again. And if I choose not to accept? She had to ask, had to know they meant it when they said they wouldn't force her. If I decide that what Damon took can't be given back, that I'm better off alone, what then? Both of them flinched like she'd struck them, but Reese answered steadily. Then we leave. We lead Damon and his enforcers away from here, and we never come back. We let you live your life without the complication of mates who failed you when it mattered most. But Ember, Jackson said urgently, sensing her wavering. Before you decide, you need to know we're not asking you to forgive us. We're not asking you to forget what happened. We're just asking for the chance to stand beside you. To be what we should have been from the beginning. The blood moon hung heavy in the sky outside the broken windows, its crimson light painting everything in shades of violence and passion. The celestial clock was ticking toward 1 a.m., and Ember could feel the pressure of the deadline like a noose tightening around all 3 of them. Accept the bond by Blood Moon Peak, or watch them die. Not from silver now, but from the incomplete connection slowly poisoning them from the inside out. A partial mate bond was worse than no bond at all. It would eat at them until their wolves went feral and their minds broke, and they became the very monsters that pack law said should be put down. She could save them, or she could let them go. The choice was hers, and for the first time in 6 months, that power felt like the gift it was supposed to be rather than the curse it had become. Accept our bond, Rhys whispered, his hand finding hers in the chaos. Please, Ember, let us stand with you. Let us fix what we broke. But we won't force you, Jackson repeated, his other hand settling warm and steady on her shoulder. Even if refusing us kills us, even if Damon wins, the choice is yours and yours alone. Damon laughed from his position by the window, the sound ugly and triumphant. She won't do it. She's too broken, too afraid, too— Shut up, Ember said, and the command in her voice made even the alpha fall silent. I didn't survive 6 months alone by being afraid. I didn't heal myself from a rejection bond by being broken. And I sure as hell didn't pull 2 dying wolves into my cabin just to watch them be taken from me. She looked at Rhys and Jackson, really looked at them. And through the bond, she felt everything they were offering laid bare before her. Their hearts, their wolves, their futures, all of it hers, for the taking if she was brave enough to reach out. You hesitated once, she said. Don't ever hesitate again. Then she kissed them both. The world exploded into golden light. Ember had meant the kiss as acceptance, as the beginning of the bonding ritual that would tie them together permanently. What she hadn't anticipated was the sheer force of power that erupted the moment her lips touched Rhys's, then Jackson's, sealing their connection with an intimacy that went beyond physical contact. The incomplete bond didn't just complete, it detonated. Golden threads blazed between them like lightning given form, wrapping around all 3 of them in patterns so complex and beautiful they defied description. The Luna markings on Ember's arms flared brilliant white and began to spread, flowing across her shoulders and down her back in intricate designs that looked like lace made from starlight. Power rolled off her in waves that made the cabin's wooden walls groan, and the remaining glass in the windows crack further. Through the bond she felt everything Rhys's sharp intelligence suddenly accessible to her like files opening in her mind. Jackson's warrior instincts merging with her own until she could sense threats before they materialized. Both of their wolves twining with hers in a dance that was simultaneously 3 separate entities and one unified whole. And underneath it all, she felt their love pouring into her through the connection. 6 months of longing and regret, and desperate hope finally finding release. It was overwhelming. It was terrifying. It was the most right thing she'd ever experienced. Damon's roar of fury barely registered through the cascade of sensation. No. His alpha command slammed into the cabin like a physical force, trying to break their connection, to reassert his dominance over his wayward betas. I command you, Rhys, Jackson, break the bond. Return to your alpha. Obey me. The command bounced off the golden light surrounding them like arrows striking a steel shield. Ember broke the kiss and turned to face Damon, feeling her mates move with her in perfect synchronization. They flanked her protectively, Rhys on her left, Jackson on her right, but she could feel through the bond that they were following her lead now, not the other way around. The triad had shifted their hierarchy. She was Luna, and Luna led. Your commands don't work on them anymore, she said, her voice resonating with a power that made even the enforcers take a step back. They're mine now. They belong to our triad, not to your pack. Damon's eyes blazed pure gold, his wolf fully surfaced and furious. You can't just steal pack members, you stupid girl. Blood oaths are superseded by mate bonds, Rhys finished calmly, though she could feel his satisfaction through their connection. You know this. Every alpha knows this. The mate bond is sacred, inviolable. You can no more break it with commands than you can command the moon to stop rising. Besides, Jackson added, his voice carrying a dangerous edge, we were never truly yours. We swore those oaths under duress, under alpha compulsion, when we were too young to know better. A Luna's claim breaks false loyalty. Real loyalty can't be commanded, it has to be earned. Through the bond, Ember felt something shift in both of them. The blood oaths Damon mentioned, she could actually sense them now. Feel the supernatural chains that had bound Rhys and Jackson to their alpha since they'd come of age. Dark, restrictive things that had wrapped around their wolves like barbed wire, forcing obedience even when every instinct screamed rebellion. The triad bond was burning through those chains like acid through rope. She watched through their shared consciousness as the blood oaths crumbled, dissolving into nothing beneath the greater power of true mate bonds. Rhys and Jackson both gasped as the last restrictions fell away. Their wolves finally, completely free for the first time in their adult lives. "You're going to regret this," Damon said, his voice dropping to a deadly whisper. "All three of you. I'll make sure of it." "No," Ember said, and she felt the Luna power rising in her chest like a tidal wave. "You're going to leave. You're going to take your enforcers and walk out of here, and you're never going to threaten us again." Damon laughed, a harsh, grating sound. "Or what? You'll fight me? You, a newly manifested Luna, who doesn't even know how to use her power, and 2 betas who are still recovering from silver poisoning, against me and 4 trained enforcers?" He spread his arms wide. "Please, try it. I'd love to see the goddess's gift wasted on someone so pathetically." Ember moved. She didn't think about it, didn't plan it, didn't even consciously choose to act. Her wolf simply took over, flooding her with Luna power and instinct. And suddenly she was across the cabin with her hand wrapped around Damon's throat, lifting him off the ground with strength that shouldn't have been possible. His eyes went wide with shock. "I said leave," she growled, and her voice resonated with harmonics that made the air vibrate. Behind her, she felt Reese and Jackson's power feeding into hers through the bond, amplifying her strength until Damon's 6 generations of alpha bloodline and pure dominant force looked small in her grip. The enforcers raised their weapons but froze when Jackson snarled a warning, his own wolf manifesting partially so that his eyes glowed gold and his canines elongated. "Lower those guns or I'll tear your throats out before you can fire." "Stand down," Reese added, and despite no longer being bound by blood oath to the pack, his voice still carried the authority of someone who'd commanded warriors for years. "This doesn't have to get messy." "Too late for that," one of the enforcers muttered, but he lowered his weapon. The others followed suit, clearly unwilling to start a fight they weren't sure they could win. Ember kept her attention on Damon, feeling his pulse racing beneath her palm, feeling his wolf struggling against her dominance and failing. Through the bond she could sense Reese feeding her tactical information, pressure points, vulnerable spots, exact force required to incapacitate without killing. From Jackson came warrior instinct, awareness of every threat in the room, every possible attack vector, every movement from the enforcers. The triad wasn't just making her stronger, it was making her complete. "You were right about one thing," she said, her face inches from Damon's. "You did break something in me 6 months ago. You broke my ability to trust blindly, my willingness to submit to authority just because someone told me I should. My belief that being Omega meant being powerless." She let more power flow through her hand, not enough to hurt him but enough that he gasped, his fingers scrabbling uselessly at her wrist. "But what you didn't break, what you couldn't break, was the core of who I am. The Luna power was always there, dormant, waiting for the right moment to manifest. You didn't prevent me from becoming what I was meant to be. You just delayed it." She smiled, and it wasn't a kind expression. "And in delaying it, you made me stronger, because I didn't just manifest as Luna, I manifested as a Luna who knows what it's like to survive alone, to fight for every scrap of dignity, to rebuild herself from nothing." "Ember," Damon choked out, his face reddening. "I'm not finished." She pulled him closer, making sure he could see the Luna markings glowing on her skin, the power radiating from her eyes. "You wanted to neutralize a threat. Instead, you created an enemy. You wanted to keep me weak and broken. Instead, you gave me 6 months to learn self-reliance and survival, and exactly how little I need a pack that would discard its own members for the crime of being born different." Through the bond, she felt Reese's surge of pride, Jackson's fierce satisfaction. They were with her completely, their wolves merged with hers in a unified front that made her feel invincible. "So here's what's going to happen," she continued, her voice dropping to match Damon's earlier deadly whisper. "You're going to leave. You're going to return to Frostfang and tell them that Reese and Jackson are gone dead in the woods, killed by rogues, whatever lie you want to spin. And you're going to leave us alone. And if I don't?" Damon managed to gasp out. "Then I'll do what you were afraid I'd do from the beginning." She released him, letting him drop to the floor where he caught himself on his hands and knees, coughing. "I'll come to Frostfang myself. I'll stand in that clearing where you rejected me, and I'll offer every wolf in your pack a choice. Follow the alpha who rules through fear and dominance, or follow the Luna who leads through protection and genuine care." She crouched down so they were eye level, her Luna power making the air around her shimmer like heat waves. How many do you think would choose you, Damon? How many wolves are loyal because they love you, versus how many are loyal because they're afraid of what happens if they're not? His silence was answer enough. That's what I thought. She stood, feeling Reese and Jackson immediately flanking her again, their presence solid and reassuring through the bond. So take your enforcers and go. Consider this your only warning. Damon pushed himself to his feet slowly, his silver eyes blazing with hatred and something else, something that looked almost like fear. This isn't over. This isn't over. Yes, it is, Jackson said flatly. You lost the moment you let her walk away 6 months ago. You just didn't know it yet. We could have been allies, Reese added, his tactical mind clearly already working through implications. If you'd handled this differently, you could have had a Luna in your pack, a genuine asset. Instead, you made an enemy of the one wolf who could have strengthened Frostfang beyond measure. I don't need a Luna. Damon spat, some of his composure returning now that Ember wasn't actively choking him. I've ruled perfectly well without one for 5 years. You've ruled through intimidation and violence, Ember corrected. That's not strength. That's tyranny wearing an alpha's skin. Damon's jaw clenched. For a moment she thought he might attack, might let his rage override his survival instinct. Through the bond, she felt Reese and Jackson preparing for exactly that outcome, their wolves ready to defend her to the death, if necessary. But Damon was smarter than his fury. He'd survived as alpha for 5 years by knowing when to fight and when to retreat. This was a retreat situation. Come on, he said to his enforcers, his voice tight with barely controlled anger. We're leaving. Sir, one of them started. Now. The alpha command was back, reasserting his dominance over wolves who were still bound to him by blood oath. They moved immediately, falling into formation behind their alpha like well-trained soldiers. Damon paused at the broken window, turning back to look at the 3 of them, Luna and her 2 mates, glowing with power and united by bonds he'd tried to prevent. When this blows up in your face, when the reality of what you are brings every ambitious alpha and power-hungry pack to your door, don't come crying to me for protection. We won't need your protection, Ember said confidently, even though part of her registered the very real threat in his words. We have each other. How touching. His smile was venomous. Let's see how long that lasts when the council hears about this. When they send investigators to verify that an Omega has manifested as Luna. When they demand you present yourself for testing and evaluation and potential reassignment to a more suitable pack. Ice flooded Ember's veins. The council. She'd been so focused on Damon and the immediate threat that she hadn't thought about the larger political implications of what she'd just done. Lunas were rare enough that the Werewolf Council, the governing body that oversaw all North American packs, took a direct interest in them. They had rules about Luna placement, about proper pack integration, about, oh yes, Damon said, reading her expression with satisfaction. I see you've realized the scope of your problem. The council doesn't look kindly on rogue Lunas, especially ones bonded to wolves outside proper pack structure. They'll come for you, Ember. And when they do, you'll wish you'd accepted my rejection quietly and learned your place. He shifted then, a fluid transformation that took him from human to massive black wolf in seconds, and leaped through the window into the forest beyond. His enforcers followed, their own shifts equally practiced, until the clearing around her cabin was empty except for paw prints in the snow and the lingering scent of alpha fury. The moment they were gone, Ember's legs gave out. Reese and Jackson caught her before she hit the floor, their arms wrapping around her in a protective embrace that was both comforting and possessive. Through the bond, she felt their wolves settling, the immediate threat past, but underneath the relief was concern for her, for what she'd just done, for the target she'd painted on all their backs. The council, she whispered, the full weight of it hitting her. He's going to report us to the council. Probably, Reese agreed, his hand stroking her hair in a gesture clearly meant to soothe. But he has to be careful about how he does it. If he admits he rejected his true mate, especially one who manifested as Luna, he'll lose significant standing with the council. They take mate bond sanctity very seriously, and if he admits he tried to have us killed for escaping to our own mate, that's grounds for alpha challenge, Jackson added. He's not as protected as he thinks he is. But we're not protected at all. Ember pulled back enough to look at both of them, seeing her own fears reflected in their eyes. We're rogues. We have no pack, no territory, no legal standing. If the council decides I need to be reassigned, they can't break a completed triad bond. Rhys interrupted firmly. It's literally impossible. The only way to sever a triad is death, and the council won't execute us for the crime of being mated to each other. Are you sure about that? She searched his face, looking for certainty she desperately needed, because Damon seemed pretty confident they'd side with him. Damon says a lot of things, Jackson rumbled, his arms tightening around her. Doesn't make them true. The council has rules, yes, but they also have precedent. There are other triad bonds in existence, other Lunas who've bonded with non-alpha wolves. It's rare, but not unheard of. And none of those Lunas were rejected and exiled first, Ember pointed out. None of them manifested their power alone in the wilderness, and then completed a triad bond with two wolves from the pack that cast them out. We're not precedent, we're a political nightmare. Silence fell between them, as the truth of that statement settled. Through the bond, she felt their attempts to project confidence, to reassure her that everything would be fine, but underneath was the same worry gnawing at her. They'd won this battle, but the war might be just beginning. Hey, Rhys said softly, tilting her chin up so she had to meet his eyes. Whatever comes, we face it together. That's what the bond means. That's what being mates means. We're not going anywhere, Jackson added, his dark eyes fierce with determination. Council, Damon, angry alphas with territorial issues doesn't matter. You're ours and we're yours, and anyone who tries to separate us will have to go through both of us first. The sincerity in their voices, the absolute certainty flowing through the bond, made something in her chest loosen. She'd spent 6 months alone, learning to rely only on herself, trusting no one. The idea of having partners, of sharing burdens instead of carrying everything solo, it was foreign and terrifying and desperately appealing all at once. I'm scared, she admitted, the words coming easier than she expected. I'm scared of the council, scared of what Damon might do, scared that I don't actually know how to be Luna, or how to use this power, or how to— Rhys kissed her, cutting off the spiral of anxiety with lips that were warm and sure and tasted like pine needles and promise. When he pulled back, Jackson immediately took his place, his kiss different, fiercer, more possessive, carrying the edge of a warrior claiming what was his. By the time they both released her, Ember was breathless and dizzy, and significantly less focused on her fears. We'll teach you, Rhys said, his practical nature asserting itself. Luna powers work on instinct, but there are techniques, exercises, ways to control and direct the energy. I've studied the old texts. I can help, and I'll teach you to fight, Jackson added, because Luna power is one thing, but knowing how to physically defend yourself is another. You're never going to be helpless again. I'll make sure of it. What if I'm terrible at fighting? She couldn't help the small smile that tugged at her lips despite everything. Then you'll be terrible at fighting with someone who loves you anyway, Jackson said simply, and the casual declaration made her heart stutter. Love. They loved her. She could feel it through the bond, not new love, not the fragile beginning stages, but something that had been building for 6 months of separation and longing. They'd loved her since the spring awakening ceremony, since the moment the mate bond had snapped into place, and that love had survived rejection and exile and Damon's best efforts to destroy it. I don't know if I can say it back yet, she said honestly. I want to. I feel it building. But 6 months of being alone, of trusting no one, I need time to. We know, Rhys interrupted gently. We're not asking for declarations, Ember. We're just asking for a chance. Time to prove ourselves. Time to show you that we're not the cowards who hesitated 6 months ago. Time to protect you from whatever Damon throws at us next, Jackson agreed. A howl split the night, distant but unmistakable, coming from the direction Damon and his enforcers had fled. It was answered by another, then another, until the forest around them rang with the sounds of multiple wolves converging on their location. Ember's blood ran cold. That's not Damon. No, Rhys confirmed, his expression grim as he moved to the broken window and peered out into the darkness. That's the rest of Frostfang pack. He called for backup. How many? Jackson was already moving, positioning himself between Ember and the window, his body language pure warrior readiness. Hard to say, at least 20, maybe more. Rhys turned back to them, his tactical mind clearly racing through options. We can't fight that many, not in your condition and not without proper weapons. Then we run, Ember said, making the decision before fear could paralyze her. We run, and we don't stop until we're far enough away that they can't track us. And go where? Jackson asked. Though he was already moving, gathering supplies from around the cabin with practiced efficiency. We have no territory, no safe houses, no allies. Ember looked around her cabin, the sanctuary she'd built over 6 months of exile. The first place that had felt like home after her world shattered. Books her grandmother had given her lined the makeshift shelves. Furs she'd tanned herself covered the floor. The bed she'd carved from salvaged wood sat in the corner, made warm with blankets she'd woven during long winter nights. This was hers. The one place in the world that belonged to her, and no one else. And she was about to walk away from it, possibly forever. We'll figure it out, she said, pulling on the heavy coat she'd made from wolf pelts. Together. That's what mates do, right? Through the bond she felt their surge of emotion, pride and love and fierce determination. They were hers and she was theirs, and maybe that would be enough to survive whatever was coming. The howls were getting closer. They were out of time. Let's go, Rhys said, taking her hand while Jackson grabbed their meager supplies. Stay close, stay quiet, and trust us to get you out of here. Ember took one last look at her cabin, her sanctuary, her carefully built life of solitude and safety. Then she stepped out into the blood moon night with her mates at her side, and didn't look back. They made it 3 miles before the ambush. Ember heard it first. Her Luna-enhanced senses, picking up the subtle shift in the forest's rhythm. The way the night birds suddenly went silent, the barely perceptible scent of wolves downwind, trying to mask their presence. Through the bond she transmitted the warning to Rhys and Jackson without speaking, feeling their instant alertness as their own instincts kicked in. Surrounded, Rhys murmured, his hand tightening on hers. At least 15 wolves in a perimeter formation. Professional encirclement. Not just enforcers, Jackson added, his warrior senses cataloging threats with frightening efficiency. I smell hunters. Damon brought the pack's elite tracking unit. Hunters. The wolves specifically trained to track and retrieve rogues, the ones who never failed to bring back their targets dead or alive, depending on the alpha's orders. Ember's stomach dropped. She'd heard stories about the hunters during her time in Frostfang, whispered tales of wolves who disappeared and were dragged back, broken and bleeding, made examples of to discourage others from attempting escape. She'd never imagined she'd be on the receiving end of their attention. We can't outrun them, she said, the tactical assessment coming easier with Rhys's strategic mind accessible through their bond. Not with them already positioned. They'll herd us wherever they want us to go. So we don't run. Jackson's voice carried a dangerous edge, his wolf rising to the surface until his eyes glowed gold in the darkness. We fight. Against 15 trained hunters? Rhys shook his head. That's suicide, even with Luna power amplifying us. Then what do you suggest? Ember could feel the wolves closing in, the circle tightening with predatory patience. We can't run. We can't fight what's left. Through the bond, she felt Rhys's mind racing, considering and discarding options with frightening speed. His tactical genius was one of the reasons Damon had kept him so close. Had bound him with blood oath to prevent him from taking his skills to a rival pack. Now that genius was working for her instead, and she could almost see the calculations happening behind his hazel eyes. We negotiate, he said finally. Damon wants something. He wouldn't bring hunters to kill us, he'd have done that at the cabin. He's bringing us back for a reason. What reason could he possibly? Ember started, but the trees ahead of them exploded with movement. Wolves poured out of the forest in a coordinated strike, massive creatures in full shifted form, their eyes glowing with predatory intelligence, their movements synchronized with military precision. The hunters. Each one easily weighed 200 pounds in wolf form, bred and trained for exactly this kind of operation. They didn't attack. They formed a living wall, cutting off the forward path while more wolves emerged from behind and to the sides, completing the encirclement. Within seconds, Ember, Reese, and Jackson stood in the center of a circle of teeth and claws, and barely contained violence. Then Damon stepped out of the trees in human form, and Ember's blood turned to ice. He wasn't alone. Behind him came 12 more wolves in human form, and Ember recognized all of them. Pack Council members, the elite inner circle who advised the Alpha on major decisions, who held the real power behind Frostfang's throne. And in the center of that group, leaning heavily on a carved walking stick, was Elder Moira. Elder Moira, who had been with Frostfang for 70 years, who remembered when Ember's grandmother had been Pack Luna, before age and illness had taken her, who had always looked at Ember with an expression that suggested she saw something others missed. Ember Ashford, Elder Moira's voice carried across the clearing despite her age, commanding attention without dominance. Or should I say, Luna Ashford? Yes. I can see the markings even from here. Quite impressive for a spontaneous manifestation. Ember's mouth went dry. This wasn't just Damon being petty. This was official pack business. Elder Moira. She managed, her voice steadier than she felt. I don't want trouble. We were leaving pack territory peacefully. Peacefully? Damon's laugh was harsh. You assaulted your alpha, stole 2 of my best warriors, and fled like the coward you are. That's not peaceful. That's criminal. You tried to have them killed, Ember shot back, her Luna power flaring with her anger. Silver bullets, Damon. Assassination isn't exactly legal under pack law either. Murmurs rippled through the council members. Several looked at Damon with expressions that suggested this was news to them. Good. Maybe not everyone was complicit in his schemes. I sent enforcers to retrieve warriors who broke their blood oaths, Damon said smoothly, but she could see the tension in his jaw. If silver was used, it was without my knowledge or approval. An overreaction by zealous subordinates. Liar, Jackson growled, his wolf so close to the surface that his voice came out distorted. You gave the order yourself. We heard you through the pack link before we crossed the border. More murmurs. Elder Moira's expression remained neutral, but her ancient eyes studied Damon with an intensity that made even the alpha shift uncomfortably. Be that as it may, the elder said, her walking stick tapping against the frozen ground. We have a situation that requires resolution. A manifested Luna, a completed triad bond, and 2 high-ranking warriors who have broken their blood oaths to follow a mate connection. This is unprecedented in Frostfang's recent history. It's simple, Damon interjected. They broke pack law. They face pack justice. The triad bond can be severed through. The triad bond cannot be severed, Elder Moira interrupted, her voice sharp enough to make Damon close his mouth. I may be old, Alpha Blackthorn, but I am not senile. Triad bonds are permanent, inviolable, and sacred. To suggest otherwise shows a concerning ignorance of our most fundamental laws. Ember felt a flutter of hope. Elder Moira knew the law, and more importantly, she wasn't afraid to correct Damon publicly. Maybe this wouldn't end in bloodshed after all. Then what do you suggest, Elder? Damon's tone was respectful, but his eyes blazed with barely controlled fury. We can't simply let them walk away. It sets a precedent that any wolf can break their oaths and flee pack territory without consequences. I suggest, Elder Moira said, moving forward with slow, deliberate steps that nonetheless radiated authority, that we examine the full circumstances before rushing to judgment. Tell me, Luna Ashford, do you know why your grandmother left Frostfang 30 years ago? The question hit Ember like a physical blow. My grandmother? She didn't leave, she was Pack Luna until she died when I was 12. She was Pack Luna, Elder Moira confirmed. Until she wasn't. Until she challenged the alpha of her time, Damon's grandfather, over his treatment of lower-ranked wolves. Until she chose exile, rather than watch him systematically break every wolf who showed signs of power that might threaten his position. The clearing had gone completely silent. Even the hunters seemed frozen, their attention riveted on the elder's words. My grandmother challenged an alpha? Ember's voice came out as a whisper. This wasn't in any of the stories she'd been told, wasn't in any of the carefully edited pack histories she'd read. She challenged his authority to abuse pack members, Elder Moira corrected. And when he rejected her counsel, when he made it clear that Luna opinions held no weight in his pack, she made a choice. She could stay and watch wolves suffer, or she could leave and take with her anyone who wished to follow. That's not how the story goes, Damon said, but there was uncertainty in his voice now. My grandfather told me she abandoned the pack, that she was weak, couldn't handle the responsibility of being Luna. Your grandfather told you what he needed you to believe, Elder Moira said bluntly. Just as you've told this pack what you need them to believe about Ember's rejection and exile. But I was there. Alpha Blackthorn. I watched your grandfather systematically destroy one of the strongest Lunas Frostfang has ever known because he was terrified of sharing power. And now I'm watching history repeat itself with her granddaughter. The words hung in the frozen air like an accusation. Around the circle, Ember saw council members exchanging glances, saw the hunter's aggressive postures softening into something more uncertain. Elder Moira, Damon said carefully. I respect your years of service, but you're speaking of events from decades ago that have no bearing on— No bearing? The elder's walking stick slammed into the ground with surprising force. You rejected your true mate at her spring awakening ceremony. You felt her manifest as Luna, and instead of celebrating the goddess's gift to our pack, you destroyed her publicly to prevent her from threatening your authority. You commanded 2 wolves to ignore their own mate bonds and watch their Luna be exiled. And when they finally broke free of your manipulation to seek their true mate, you sent hunters with silver to kill them. She took another step forward, and despite her age, despite the walking stick, every wolf in the clearing could feel the power radiating from her. Elder Moira might not be Luna, but 70 years of pack service had given her an authority that transcended rank. You are, she continued, her voice ringing with judgment, exactly like your grandfather. And I will not stand by and watch you destroy another Luna, because you're too insecure to share power appropriately. The silence that followed was deafening. Damon's face had gone pale with fury, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. You forget yourself, Elder. I am Alpha here. My word is law. Your word is law when it aligns with pack law. Elder Moira corrected. But you've broken our most sacred laws: mate bond sanctity, Luna protection, beta autonomy in the face of true mate connections. You've violated everything our pack is supposed to stand for, and you did it out of fear and selfishness. Then what would you have me do? Damon's voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. Welcome them back with open arms? Pretend the last 6 months didn't happen? Give Ember a position of authority despite her being an exile and a rogue? I would have you face the consequences of your actions, Elder Moira said simply. You rejected your true mate. Pack law is clear about the penalty for that. You lose your claim to her permanently. She owes you nothing. Not loyalty, not submission, not even acknowledgement of your authority over her. She's still pack-born, Damon argued. That gives me jurisdiction. She was pack-born, the elder interrupted. Then you exiled her. You made her rogue, Damon. You removed her from pack protection and pack law. You cannot now claim jurisdiction over someone you explicitly cast out. Through the bond, Ember felt Reese's sudden surge of hope, Jackson's fierce satisfaction. Elder Moira was systematically dismantling every legal argument Damon had, exposing the fundamental contradictions in his position. And the blood oaths? Damon was grasping at straws now. Reese and Jackson swore themselves to me, to the pack. That bond is superseded by mate bonds, Elder Moira finished. As you well know, as every alpha has known since the first packs formed, you cannot hold wolves to oaths that conflict with the goddess's chosen bonds. To try is to violate the most fundamental law we have. Damon's control finally snapped. His eyes flashed gold, and power exploded from him in a wave of alpha dominance that drove several of the younger council members to their knees. Enough. I am Alpha of Frostfang, and I will not be lectured by an old woman who should have retired decades ago. This pack is mine, these wolves are mine, and I will not allow people— You will not allow? Ember's voice cut through his tirade like a blade, her own Luna power rising to meet his alpha dominance. The golden light erupted from her skin again, brighter than before, fed by the bond with Reese and Jackson until it illuminated the entire clearing. You don't get to allow or disallow anything anymore, Damon. You gave up that right when you rejected me, when you exiled me, when you tried to have my mates killed." She took a step forward, and to her satisfaction, Damon actually stepped back. "You said I'd regret this," she continued, her voice resonating with Luna authority that made even the hunters lower their heads in automatic deference. "You said the reality of what I am would bring trouble to my door. But you were wrong about one thing. You thought being Luna would make me weak, would make me a target, would make me need your protection." The Luna markings on her arms blazed brilliant white, spreading further until they covered her shoulders, her collarbone, creeping up her neck in patterns that looked like frost-given form. "But I don't need your protection. I don't need your pack. I don't need anything you have to offer." She felt Reese and Jackson moving to flank her, their presence solid and sure through the bond. "Because I have something you'll never understand. Wolves who chose me not because they were commanded to, not because they were afraid of punishment, but because they actually wanted to. Because they felt the mate bond and decided I was worth fighting for, worth dying for, worth everything." "How touching," Damon sneered, but she could see the fear beneath his bravado now. A pretty speech from a confused girl playing at Luna. But speeches don't change reality. You're still outnumbered, still surrounded, still completely at my mercy. "Are we?" Reese's voice was calm, almost conversational. "Because from where I'm standing, it looks like your own council is questioning your judgment. Your own elder is calling out your violations of pack law, and your hunters, well, they're trained to retrieve rogues. But Ember isn't technically rogue anymore, is she? She's bonded Luna with 2 pack-born mates. That's a legitimate pack structure all on its own." "A triad is not a pack," Damon spat. "Actually," Elder Moira interjected. "By the old laws, the ones that predate modern pack structures, a mated triad with a Luna at its center is the foundation of a pack. It's how most of our current packs started, before Alpha's consolidated power and rewrote the histories to favor their narratives." She turned to address the council members, her voice carrying clearly. "The question before us is not whether Ember has the right to leave with her mates. Pack law is clear she does. The question is whether Frostfang will acknowledge its mistakes and seek reconciliation, or whether we'll continue down the path of alpha tyranny that destroyed my generation's Luna, and is now destroying this one. Reconciliation." Damon's voice was incredulous. "With wolves who've broken every oath, defied every command, and assaulted their alpha? You're suggesting we just forgive all of that?" "I'm suggesting," Elder Moira said, her ancient eyes moving from Damon to Ember, "that we give our Luna a choice, the choice she should have been given 6 months ago." Ember's heart hammered in her chest. "What choice?" "Return to Frostfang as Luna," Elder Moira said simply. "Not as Damon's mate. That bond is severed and cannot be repaired. But as Pack Luna in your own right, bonded to Reese and Jackson, with full authority and autonomy. Work with the Alpha, yes, but not under him. Restore the balance of power that's been missing since your grandmother left." The offer hung in the air like a lifeline and a trap simultaneously. "She'd be returning to the pack that exiled her," Jackson said flatly. "To wolves who watched her be destroyed and did nothing. Why would she ever agree to that?" "Because not all of us did nothing," a voice called from the circle of council members. Ember turned to see Abel Reed step forward, the pack's head healer, a wolf who'd always been kind to her before the rejection. "Some of us argued against the exile. Some of us tried to speak up, and were silenced by Alpha Command. Some of us have been waiting 6 months for a chance to make this right. Abel," Damon warned, his voice carrying that dangerous edge again. But Abel ignored him, his attention focused on Ember. "You healed Reese and Jackson tonight. I can see it in them. They should be dead from that much silver poisoning, but they're not even limping. That's Luna power, the kind our pack desperately needs. We've had 3 deaths this winter from injuries that should have been survivable. Without a Luna to heal, without that stabilizing presence, we're becoming exactly what Damon feared, a pack ruled by violence with no counterbalance." Other voices joined in, council members stepping forward to add their perspectives. Stories of pack members who'd been hurt under Damon's leadership, of lower-ranked wolves who'd fled rather than face his judgment, of a pack structure becoming increasingly unstable without Luna balance. Through it all, Damon stood silent, his expression growing darker as he realized his own counsel was turning against him. "You want me to come back," Ember said slowly, testing the words. As Luna, with full authority. With full traditional Luna authority, Elder Moira confirmed, which means shared leadership with the Alpha, joint decision-making on major pack matters, the ability to overrule Alpha commands if they violate pack welfare, the authority to challenge any decision you believe is unjust. That's not how modern packs function, Damon interjected, but his voice lacked its earlier certainty. Then perhaps modern packs are functioning incorrectly, Elder Moira said bluntly. The old ways had Alphas and Lunas as equal partners, each bringing different strengths to pack leadership. Alphas provided protection and external strength. Lunas provided healing and internal stability. Together they created balanced packs that thrived for generations. She turned back to Ember. I cannot undo what was done to you 6 months ago. Cannot erase the pain of rejection or the isolation of exile. But I can offer you the chance to reclaim what should have always been yours. A place in this pack, authority to shape its future, and the power to ensure no wolf is ever treated the way you were again. It was a good offer, a generous offer, more than Ember had ever expected to receive from a pack that had cast her out. It was also completely, utterly wrong. No, she said, the word coming out clear and certain. Surprise rippled through the council. Even Elder Moira looked taken aback. No. Damon recovered first, his expression shifting from shock to vindication. You see? She refuses to serve her pack. Refuses to fulfill her Luna duties. This proves. I refuse, Ember interrupted, her Luna power flaring with her conviction, to return to a pack that had to be forced into wanting me back. I refuse to work beside an Alpha who tried to have my mates killed. I refuse to heal wolves who watched me be exiled and said nothing. And I refuse to pretend that offering me authority now erases 6 months of abandonment. She looked around the circle, meeting the eyes of council members who'd known her since birth, hunters who'd trained alongside her, wolves who'd once called her packmate and friend. You want a Luna? Then you should have fought for the one you had. You should have challenged Damon's rejection. Should have questioned the exile. Should have done anything besides standing by and watching it happen. We tried, Abel said desperately. Alpha command. Isn't an excuse? Ember finished. Elder Moira just spent 10 minutes explaining how Alpha authority has limits, how some laws supersede others, how pack welfare should come before individual Alpha pride. You all knew that. You just chose not to act on it because it was easier to let me be destroyed than to stand up to him. The truth of her words settled over the clearing like a blanket of shame. She saw wolves lower their eyes, saw shoulders slump, saw the weight of collective failure in every face. So no, she continued, her voice gentler now but no less firm. I won't return to Frostfang. I won't be your Luna. I won't fix a pack that's fundamentally broken at its core. Then what will you do? Elder Moira asked, genuine curiosity in her ancient voice. 3 wolves alone cannot survive long-term. You need pack, need territory, need the support structure that pack provides. Ember felt Reese and Jackson's presence through the bond, felt their absolute faith in whatever she decided, felt the strength of the triad connection that had saved them all tonight. Then we'll build our own pack, she said, the idea crystallizing as she spoke. The 3 of us, and anyone else who wants to join us. A pack that actually lives by the values Frostfang claims to hold. A pack where Luna and Alpha authority are balanced. Where lower-ranked wolves aren't disposable. Where mate bonds are sacred and protected, always. She met Damon's furious gaze without flinching. You were afraid the triad would threaten your power. You were right to be afraid. But not because we'd overthrow you, because we'd show every wolf in your pack what real leadership looks like. And eventually, they'd choose us over you. You can't start a pack with 3 wolves, Damon said. But there was an edge of panic in his voice now. You have no territory, no resources, no. We have each other, Jackson interrupted. That's more than most packs start with. And we have the old laws on our side, Reese added, his tactical mind clearly already working through the logistics. A Luna-centered triad is a legitimate pack structure. We can petition the council for recognition, for unclaimed territory, for all the rights any other pack has. The council will never approve, Damon started. The council will have no choice, Elder Moira said, and there was something almost like pride in her voice. If Ember manifests as Luna, completes a triad bond, and formally declares pack formation, the council must acknowledge it. That's the law, Alpha Blackthorn. The same law you claim to uphold so strictly. She turned to Ember, and her smile was sharp and knowing. Your grandmother would be very proud. She tried to reform Frostfang from within, and failed. Perhaps you'll succeed in building something better from the ground up. Damon's power exploded outward in a last-ditch attempt to reassert dominance, but Ember met it with her own Luna authority, and the combined strength of her triad bond. The two forces collided in the center of the clearing. Alpha dominance versus Luna protection, and for the first time in Frostfang's history, Alpha dominance lost. The golden light pushed back the crushing weight of Damon's power, until even the hunters were freed from its influence, until every wolf in the clearing could breathe and think, and choose without Alpha compulsion, clouding their judgment. In the stunned silence that followed, Ember spoke clearly. Anyone who wants to leave Frostfang is welcome to join us. No oaths required. No blood bonds. No forced loyalty. Just wolves choosing to build something better together. She didn't expect anyone to take her up on the offer. Not really. These were Frostfang wolves, born and raised in this pack, with families and histories and roots going back generations. But Abel Reed stepped forward. I'm coming with you. Then two of the hunters shifted to human form and added their voices. Us too. One by one, wolves began to move, some from the council, some from the hunters, some from the regular pack members who'd been watching from the trees. Not many, maybe 10 in total, out of the 40+ gathered. But 10 wolves choosing freedom over fear, choosing to follow a Luna they believed in rather than an Alpha they were commanded to obey. Damon's face went from pale to purple with rage. Traitors, all of you. You break your blood oaths, you abandon your pack, We follow the old laws, one of the former hunters said calmly. The ones that say wolves can choose their pack, choose their leadership, choose their future. You taught us to obey without question, Alpha. Maybe it's time we learn to question instead. Ember felt tears burning behind her eyes but refused to let them fall. She'd survived rejection and exile by staying strong, by never letting them see her break. She wouldn't start crying now, just because wolves were choosing her, believing in her, seeing her as worth following. Through the bond, she felt Reese's fierce pride, Jackson's protective satisfaction, both of them radiating support and love, and absolute certainty that they'd made the right choice in fighting for her. This is not over, Damon said, his voice shaking with barely controlled fury. You think you can steal my wolves and start a rival pack and the council will just accept it? I'll fight this. I'll fight you. You'll do what the law allows, Elder Moira interrupted tiredly. Nothing more, nothing less. And if you're wise, Alpha Blackthorn, you'll take this as an opportunity to examine how you've been leading and make changes before more wolves choose to leave. She turned her back on him, a deliberate insult that made several council members gasp, and addressed Ember directly. I'm too old to join a new pack, child. But I remember your grandmother, and I see her strength in you. Build something worthy of her memory. Show these young wolves what real pack can be. Then she walked away, her walking stick tapping against frozen ground, leaving Damon standing alone in a clearing that had been his domain minutes before. The remaining Frostfang wolves melted back into the trees, following their Alpha in sullen silence. The hunters who'd stayed with Damon cast regretful looks back but ultimately followed orders, disappearing into darkness. And Ember stood with her mates and 10 wolves who'd chosen to follow her, surrounded by blood moon light and possibility and the terrifying freedom of having finally, completely, irrevocably broken free. So, Jackson said, his arm wrapping around her waist, we're starting a pack. Apparently. Ember agreed, leaning into his warmth. We'll need territory, Reese added practically, taking her other hand. Resources, a formal petition to the council, defensive strategies in case Damon decides to. Tomorrow, Ember interrupted, suddenly exhausted beyond measure. We'll figure all of that out tomorrow. Tonight, we just survived. That's enough. Through the bond she felt their agreement, felt the weariness in all three of them mixing with triumph and relief and lingering adrenaline. She'd faced her Alpha, rejected his authority, claimed her power, and somehow, impossibly, she'd won. The question was whether that victory would last, or whether it was just the calm before a much larger storm. Subscribe if you're tired of seeing strong females torn down by insecure alphas. Ember built herself back from nothing. While you watch, the least you can do is click that button so her story reaches others who need it. Comment below if you've ever felt discarded like Ember because your voice matters as much as hers does. They found temporary sanctuary in an abandoned ski lodge 15 miles north of Ember's cabin, far enough from Frostfang territory to feel marginally safe, but close enough to familiar terrain that her mates could navigate without difficulty. The building was falling apart, roof half collapsed, windows broken, the smell of mold and decay thick in the air, but it had walls and defensible positions, and enough space for 13 wolves to crowd together while they figured out their next move. Ember should have felt triumphant. She'd stood up to Damon, claimed her power, convinced 10 wolves to follow her into the unknown. She'd won. So why did victory taste like ash in her mouth? We need to set up patrol rotations, Jackson was saying, his tactical mind already working through logistics. He'd found a somewhat intact section of the lodge's main room and was sketching defensive positions in the dust on the floor. 4-hour shifts, 2 wolves per rotation, overlapping coverage zones. We need food first, Abel interrupted gently. The healer looked exhausted, his normally neat appearance disheveled after hours of running through frozen forest. None of us have eaten since yesterday. We can't defend anything if we collapse from hunger. I can hunt, one of the former hunters offered. Her name was Sarah. Ember remembered a quiet woman in her 30s, who'd always been kind to Omega wolves despite her elite status. Take a few wolves. Bring back whatever we can find. Do it, Ember said, trying to project confidence she didn't feel. But stay in pairs, stay alert. And if you sense any Frostfang wolves nearby, retreat immediately. We're not ready for a confrontation. Sarah nodded and left with 3 others, shifting to wolf form as they disappeared into the pre-dawn darkness. That left 9 wolves in the lodge, all looking to Ember like she had answers to questions they hadn't even asked yet. She didn't have answers. She barely had a plan beyond survive the night. Through the bond she felt Reese's concern, Jackson's protective instinct to shield her from this pressure. But she couldn't afford to show weakness now. These wolves had given up everything to follow her family's security, the only pack they'd ever known. She owed them strength, leadership, certainty, even if she felt none of those things. Get some rest, she told the remaining wolves. We'll figure out long-term plans once everyone's fed and has slept. For now, we're safe enough here. They dispersed to various corners of the lodge, most too exhausted to do more than collapse where they stood. Within minutes, soft snores filled the space wolves who'd been running on adrenaline finally crashing now that immediate danger had passed. Ember waited until they were all asleep before she let herself sag against the wall, the weight of leadership crushing down on her like a physical thing. Hey, Reese said softly, appearing at her side with that uncanny ability he had to sense when she was spiraling. Talk to me. I don't know what I'm doing, she admitted, the confession coming easier in the darkness. I stood there and made grand speeches about building a better pack, and these wolves believed me. But Reese, I don't know how to be Luna. I don't know how to lead. I barely survived 6 months alone. How am I supposed to take care of 13 wolves? 12, Jackson corrected, joining them with 3 somewhat intact blankets he'd scavenged from upstairs. You're not taking care of us, we're taking care of each other. That's what pack means. Is it? She accepted a blanket gratefully, wrapping it around her shoulders. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like I just convinced 10 wolves to commit pack suicide by following a Luna who has no territory, no resources, and no idea what she's doing. You have us, Reese said firmly. And you have power. Real power, Ember. I've studied Luna manifestations for years. What you did tonight. Pushing back Damon's alpha dominance. That's not beginner-level Luna work. That's the kind of power that builds packs, that holds them together even when everything else falls apart. Power doesn't mean I know how to use it. She closed her eyes, feeling the mate bond thrumming between them, the only thing keeping her grounded when everything else felt like chaos. What if I fail them? What if Damon attacks and I can't protect them? What if? The distant howl cut through her spiral like a knife through silk. All three of them froze. Through the bond, Ember felt Reese and Jackson's instant alertness, their wolves rising to assess the threat. That wasn't a wolf calling to pack. That was a wolf in distress. "That's Sarah," Jackson said, already moving toward the door. "The hunting party. Something's wrong." They burst out of the lodge into the gray pre-dawn light, their own wolves lending them speed as they raced toward the sound of the howls. The other wolves in the lodge were stirring now, roused by the distress calls, following at a distance. Ember found them in a clearing, a quarter-mile from the lodge, Sarah and her 3 companions in human form, surrounded by 15 Frostfang enforcers, and standing in the center of that circle, looking entirely too pleased with himself, was Damon. "Going somewhere?" he asked, conversationally, as if they were running into each other at a casual pack gathering rather than a hostile confrontation. "I have to say, I'm disappointed. You made such a dramatic exit earlier. I expected you to get further than 15 miles before stopping." Ember's blood ran cold. He'd tracked them. Of course he had. Damon was alpha for a reason, and part of that reason was his tactical mind that rivaled Reese's. He would have known they couldn't go far with 10 exhausted wolves, would have predicted they'd need shelter, would have sent scouts to watch for exactly this kind of vulnerability. "Let them go," she said, trying to keep her voice steady despite the terror clawing at her throat. "Your fight is with me, not them. My fight is with anyone who betrays Frostfang," Damon corrected. "These 4 left pack territory on a hunt and failed to return. By pack law, that's desertion. And the penalty for desertion is, well, I'm sure you remember from your training. Death. The penalty was death. They weren't deserting," Ember argued, moving forward despite Reese and Jackson's attempts to hold her back. "They were hunting for their new pack. They're not Frostfang anymore, they chose to leave. And pack law says wolves can choose their allegiance. Pack law says wolves can choose their allegiance after proper protocols are followed," Damon said with exaggerated patience. "Formal declarations, council approval, waiting periods. These 4 didn't follow protocol. They just ran off into the night following a rogue Luna and 2 oathbreakers. That's not choosing allegiance. That's desertion." Through the bond, Ember felt Reese's mind racing, searching for legal loopholes, technicalities they could exploit. But she could also feel his growing desperation. Damon was right. The old laws had processes, procedures meant to prevent exactly this kind of impulsive pack switching. They hadn't followed any of them. "So here's what's going to happen," Damon continued, his voice dropping to that dangerous whisper that preceded violence. "These 4 are coming back to Frostfang to face pack justice. The rest of you are welcome to join them, accept your punishment, and return to the pack you never should have left. Or," his smile widened, showing too many teeth, "you can watch them die and live with the knowledge that you caused it." "No." The word burst out of Ember before she could think it through. "No, you can't. There has to be another way." "There is," Damon said. "Challenge me for alpha. Right here, right now. If you win, I'll let them all go free. If you lose," he shrugged, "well, losing an alpha challenge typically means death, so the punishment will be the same either way." It was a trap. An obvious, blatant trap that she'd be insane to walk into. Alpha challenges were to the death. They were designed for wolves who'd spent years training in combat, who understood fighting, strategy, and pack dynamics, and how to leverage dominance in physical confrontation. Ember had 6 months of solitary survival and 1 night of Luna manifestation. Damon had been alpha for 5 years, had trained his entire life for leadership, had the kind of combat experience that came from defending territory against rival packs and putting down internal challenges. She would lose. And losing meant dying. "Don't do it," Jackson said urgently through their bond, his mental voice sharp with fear. "Ember, this is suicide. We'll find another way." "What other way?" she transmitted back. "He has 4 of our wolves. 4 wolves who followed me, trusted me, believed I could protect them. I can't just abandon them." "You can't die for them either," Reese argued, his tactical mind presenting scenarios and outcomes, all of which ended badly. "If you die, the triad bond breaks. Jackson and I will go feral from the severed connection. The remaining wolves will have no protection, no Luna, nothing. Your death doesn't save anyone, it destroys everything. He was right. Logically, tactically, strategically accepting Damon's challenge was the worst possible choice. But looking at Sarah's terrified face, at the 3 other wolves who'd trusted her enough to leave everything behind, Ember couldn't find it in herself to care about logic. I accept, she said, the words falling like stones into still water. Damon's smile became triumphant. Excellent. By the old laws, we fight at dawn, first light, to the death or submission. Ember, no. Jackson started, but she cut him off through the bond. I know what I'm doing. You really don't, Reese transmitted, his mental voice edged with barely controlled panic. Please, let us think this through. Find another option. There is no other option. She looked at her mates, trying to memorize their faces in case these were her last moments with them. And I'm not letting wolves die because they believed in me. The sun was just starting to lighten the eastern horizon, maybe 15 minutes until first light. 15 minutes to prepare for a fight. She had no chance of winning. Through the bond she felt Reese and Jackson's desperation, their wolves howling with the need to protect their mate, to stop her from walking into obvious slaughter. But they also felt her determination, her absolute certainty that this was the only choice her conscience would allow. At least let us help you prepare, Jackson said aloud, his voice rough with emotion. Alpha challenges allow seconds wolves who can advise between rounds, who can— There won't be rounds, Damon interrupted cheerfully. This isn't a sporting match. This is a fight to the death. She challenges. I accept. We fight until one of us can't anymore. Those are the rules. Actually. Elder Moira's voice cut through the clearing like a blade. Those aren't the complete rules. Ember's heart leaped. The elder stepped out of the trees, looking even more ancient in the gray pre-dawn light but moving with surprising steadiness. Behind her came 3 more council members, wolves who'd stayed with Frostfang, but whose expressions suggested they weren't entirely comfortable with what was happening. Elder, Damon said carefully, his smile slipping. This doesn't concern. An alpha challenge always concerns the pack, Elder, Moira interrupted. I'm required to witness, to ensure the old laws are followed properly, to verify that both parties understand the terms. Her ancient eyes moved to Ember. Do you understand the terms, child? Do you know what you're agreeing to? I'm agreeing to fight Damon for alpha position, Ember said, trying to keep her voice steady. If I win, he lets my wolves go. If I lose, you die, Moira finished bluntly. Or submit. Which amounts to the same thing in this context. Submission means accepting his authority absolutely, returning to Frostfang under whatever terms he dictates, and abandoning your triad's claim to pack status. She let that sink in before continuing. But you should also know the complete rules. An alpha challenge isn't just physical combat, it's a test of worthiness to lead, and worthiness can be demonstrated in multiple ways. Damon's expression darkened. Elder, the challenge format is for the alpha to decide. The challenge format, Moira corrected sharply, is dictated by the old laws, which supersede any individual alpha's preferences. And the old laws say that when a Luna challenges for alpha, or for the right to form an independent pack, the challenge can take 3 forms. Combat, as you've proposed. Wisdom, where both parties present their vision for pack leadership and the gathered wolves choose. Or sacrifice, where the challenger proves their willingness to put pack welfare above personal safety. Hope flared in Ember's chest. I choose wisdom. No. Damon's voice was flat. Absolute. I've already accepted a combat challenge. The terms are set. The terms are set when both parties agree to the format, Moira said. You proposed combat. She's proposing wisdom. As the challenged party, you have the right to choose which format you prefer. But, her smile was sharp. If you refuse wisdom challenge, it will be noted by the council that you were afraid to let pack members choose between your leadership and hers based on merit alone. The trap Damon had set for Ember was suddenly springing closed on him. If he insisted on combat, he'd win the fight, but lose face. Every wolf would know he'd been afraid to face her in a battle of ideas. If he accepted wisdom challenge, he'd be gambling that his authority and experience would outweigh her idealism and Luna power in the eyes of watching wolves. Ember could see him calculating, weighing options, searching for the path that gave him victory without making him look weak. "Fine," he said finally. "Wisdom challenge. We each present our vision for pack leadership. The wolves gathered here choose who they'd rather follow. If she wins, I release the 4 deserters and acknowledge her triad's right to petition for independent pack status. If I win," his smile returned, colder than before, "she and her mates return to Frostfang and submit to my authority completely. No more challenges, no more rebellion, no more questioning my decisions." It was still a terrible deal. Submission to Damon would be a living death, would mean watching him systematically destroy everything they'd tried to build. But it was better than dying in combat, better than watching her mates go feral from a severed bond. "I agree," Ember said. "Then let's begin." Elder Moira moved to the center of the clearing, her walking stick planted firmly in the frozen ground. "By the old laws, we witness a challenge for pack leadership. Alpha Damon Blackthorn defends his right to rule. Luna Ember Ashford challenges for the right to form an independent pack. Each will speak their truth. Each will present their vision, and when both have spoken, the gathered wolves will choose." She paused, her ancient eyes sweeping across the clearing, taking in Frostfang enforcers, Ember's small group of followers, the 4 captured wolves, even the council members who'd come with her. "But know this," she continued, her voice carrying weight beyond her physical form. "This is not just about 2 wolves arguing for dominance. This is about the future of our kind. About whether we continue down the path of alpha supremacy and forced loyalty, or whether we return to the old ways of balanced leadership and chosen allegiance. Your choice today will echo for generations." The sun broke over the horizon, painting the clearing in shades of gold and crimson, blood moon finally giving way to dawn. Around them, more wolves emerged from the trees. Some were Frostfang members who'd followed their alpha. Others were the remaining wolves from Ember's group, roused by the disturbance. Within minutes, nearly 50 wolves surrounded the clearing, all waiting to hear what would be said. 50 wolves, who would decide her fate. "Alpha Blackthorn," Elder Moira said formally, "speak your truth." Damon stepped forward, and Ember had to admire his presence. He looked every inch the alpha tall, powerful, radiating confidence and authority. When he spoke, his voice carried to every corner of the clearing without shouting. "I have led Frostfang for 5 years, he began. 5 years of prosperity, of territorial expansion, of strength that makes other packs think twice before challenging us. Under my leadership, we've become the most powerful pack in this region. We're respected, we're feared, we're safe." He paused, letting that sink in. "And we achieved all of that through unity, through wolves knowing their place, following orders, trusting their alpha to make the hard decisions. That's what pack is, a hierarchy that functions because every wolf accepts their role." His eyes found Ember. "But she would tear that apart. She would have you believe that pack can function without clear authority, that wolves should question their alpha, that loyalty is optional. She would create chaos in the name of freedom, would weaken us from within by making every decision a debate." He spread his arms, addressing the gathered wolves directly. "I ask you, which would you rather have? A strong pack led by a strong alpha, where you know your place and your safety is guaranteed, or a weak pack led by a confused Luna, who's only been manifested for one night, who has no experience, no track record, no proof she can protect you when threats come?" It was a good speech. A powerful speech. Ember could see wolves nodding, see the logic landing. Damon was offering certainty, security, the comfort of established hierarchy. She was offering, what? Risk? Uncertainty? The terrifying freedom of having to choose for themselves? "Luna Ashford," Elder Moira said, turning to her. "Speak your truth." Ember stepped forward on shaking legs, feeling the weight of 50 pairs of eyes on her. Through the bond she felt Reese and Jackson's support flooding into her, their absolute faith even though they knew this was likely hopeless. She wasn't a speechwriter, wasn't a politician, wasn't someone who knew how to move crowds with words. She was just a girl who'd survived 6 months alone, and learned some uncomfortable truths about pack in the process. Damon's right about one thing, she started, her voice quieter than his but carrying nonetheless. Under his leadership, Frostfang is strong, powerful, feared. She paused, meeting the eyes of wolves she'd grown up with. But ask yourselves, are you happy? Do you feel safe? Or do you feel afraid? Afraid of making mistakes, afraid of questioning orders, afraid of being the next one exiled or punished or made an example of. She saw several wolves shift uncomfortably, saw recognition in their eyes. Damon says pack requires hierarchy. And he's right. But hierarchy shouldn't mean tyranny. Shouldn't mean wolves are disposable when they're no longer useful. Shouldn't mean that being born Omega or lower ranked means you're worth less than wolves born into power. Her Luna markings began to glow softly, responding to her emotion. He asked what I'm offering. Here's my answer. I'm offering a pack where every wolf matters, where Luna and Alpha balance each other instead of Alpha ruling alone, where you can question decisions without fearing execution, where mate bonds are sacred and protected, always, where being strong doesn't mean crushing those weaker than you, it means protecting them. She felt her power rising, her wolf pressing forward with absolute conviction. Yes, I've only been Luna for one night. Yes, I have no track record, but I've also lived as the lowest ranked wolf in this pack. I know what it's like to be invisible, disposable, forgotten, and I swear to you, her voice strengthened, that no wolf in my pack will ever feel that way again. The clearing had gone completely silent. Damon offers you strength through fear, she continued. I'm offering you strength through choice. The choice to stay or go. The choice to speak up or stay silent. The choice to follow leadership you believe in, rather than leadership you're forced to accept. She turned to face Damon directly. You say, I'll create chaos. I say you've created a prison and called it safety. You say, wolves need to know their place. I say wolves should be free to become whatever they're capable of being. You say loyalty means obedience. I say loyalty that's commanded isn't loyalty at all, it's slavery. Her Luna power was fully manifested now, golden light radiating from her skin in waves that made the dawn seem dim by comparison. So yes, Alpha Blackthorn, I'm offering something different, something risky, something that requires wolves to be brave enough to choose their own path, instead of following yours blindly. She addressed the gathered wolves one final time. I'm not asking you to follow me. I'm asking you to follow the vision of pack I'm describing. If you believe wolves should have voices, should have choices, should have the freedom to challenge and question and grow, then that's the pack we'll build together. Not because I command it, but because we all choose it. The sun had fully risen now, painting the clearing in shades of gold that matched her Luna glow. Around her, wolves were murmuring, whispering, exchanging glances. Elder Moira stepped forward. You have heard both visions. Now choose. Those who would follow Alpha Blackthorn's leadership, move to his side. Those who would follow Luna Ashford's vision, move to hers. For a long moment, nothing happened. Wolves stood frozen, caught between the familiar and the unknown. Between safety and freedom. Between the Alpha they knew, and the Luna who'd only just appeared. Then Sarah moved. The hunter who'd been captured, who'd followed Ember from the beginning, stepped to her side without hesitation. The 3 wolves captured with her followed immediately after. Abel Reed came next, the healer who'd spoken up during the confrontation with Damon. Then 2 more council members who'd come with Elder Moira wolves, whose expressions suggested they'd been waiting for someone to offer an alternative to Damon's rule. One by one, wolves made their choice. Not all of them, not even most of them. The majority stayed with Damon, loyal to the Alpha they knew or afraid of what leaving might cost them. But when the movement finally stopped, Ember stood with 23 wolves who'd chosen her vision over Damon's power. Damon's face had gone pale with rage. This proves nothing. Less than half. This proves, Elder Moira interrupted, that Luna Ashford's vision has merit. That wolves want what she's offering badly enough to risk everything for it. And by the old laws, that's sufficient to grant her petition for independent pack status. She turned to Ember. You've won your challenge, child. These wolves are yours to lead. The 4 captured members are released, and your triad has earned the right to petition the council for recognition and territorial claim. Relief flooded through Ember so intensely she thought her legs might give out. They'd won. Impossibly. Incredibly. They'd actually won. But her victory lasted exactly 3 seconds. I, Alpha Damon Blackthorn, invoke my right to Alpha Command, Damon said, his voice resonating with supernatural power that made the air itself vibrate. Reese, Jackson, you are Frostfang born. You swore blood oaths to this pack. By my authority as Alpha, I command you to return to pack territory immediately and resume your positions as my betas. Through the bond, Ember felt Reese and Jackson's instant, horrified resistance as Alpha Command slammed into them like a physical force. Their bodies went rigid, their wolves howling in protest as supernatural compulsion overrode their free will. No, she started, reaching for them, but they were already moving, walking toward Damon against their will, their faces twisted with anguish, their bodies betraying them step by agonizing step. You can't, she gasped. The mate bond supersedes blood oaths, yes, Damon said, his smile returning now that he'd found a way to hurt her. But it doesn't supersede Alpha Command over pack-born wolves. They were Frostfang before they were yours, and I'm calling them home. They'll die. The words burst out of her in a scream. The triad bond, if they're separated from me by force, if the connection breaks, then perhaps they should have considered that before betraying their pack, Damon said coldly. She could feel it through the bond. The silver poisoning that she'd healed earlier was flaring back to life, responding to the stress of Alpha Command fighting against mate bonds. The wounds hadn't been fully closed, just temporarily sealed. The separation was tearing them open again from the inside. Reese and Jackson were dying, and she was powerless to stop it. Please, she begged, all pride forgotten. Please, Damon, I won the challenge. Let them go. I let your other wolves go, he corrected. I said nothing about your mates. They're mine by blood oath, and I'm taking them back. Through the bond, she felt Reese trying to speak, to apologize, to say goodbye. Felt Jackson fighting the command with everything he had, his warrior spirit raging against the chains. Felt both of them dying inch by inch, as their bodies were forced to choose between mate bond and Alpha Command. And the conflict was literally tearing them apart from the inside. Stop! Elder Moira's voice cracked like thunder. Alpha Blackthorn, you overstep. I follow pack law, Damon snarled back. These are my wolves, my betas, mine! Ember's voice erupted from her throat with power that shook the ground beneath their feet, her Luna authority blazing so bright that wolves had to shield their eyes. They are mine. My mates, my pack, my friends. The mate bond, stretched to breaking under the pressure of Alpha Command, suddenly snapped. Not broke. Snapped into a new configuration. Golden light exploded outward from Ember like a detonation, flowing through the bond to Reese and Jackson and wrapping around them like chains made from starlight. The Alpha Command shattered against it, like glass against steel, unable to withstand the combined force of Luna power and mate bond, pushed to absolute extremity. Reese and Jackson collapsed to their knees, freed from Damon's compulsion, gasping as the silver poisoning receded under another wave of Ember's healing light. But the cost, oh, the cost. Ember felt it through the bond. Felt something fundamental shift inside her as the power drain hit. She'd pushed too hard, manifested too much, demanded things from her Luna power that a newly awakened Luna shouldn't be capable of. And now her body was paying the price. She collapsed. The last thing she saw before darkness took her was Reese and Jackson's horrified faces, the mate bond pulsing frantically as they tried to reach her, tried to keep her conscious, and behind them, Damon's expression of absolute fury. She'd won the battle, but she had a terrible feeling she was about to lose the war. Darkness, not the comfortable darkness of sleep, but something deeper. Colder, a void where Ember floated untethered from her body, from her mates, from everything solid and real. She could hear voices calling her name from a great distance, could feel hands on her body trying to pull her back, but the exhaustion was overwhelming. Her Luna power had burned through her reserves like wildfire through dry grass, and now there was nothing left, nothing except the bond. Golden threads stretched through the darkness, pulsing with desperate urgency. Rhys and Jackson, trying to reach her through their connection, trying to anchor her to the physical world. She could feel their terror through the link, raw and absolute. The kind of fear that came from watching your mate slip away and being powerless to stop it. "Come back," Rhys's mental voice pleaded. "Please, Ember, come back to us. Don't you dare leave us," Jackson commanded, his warrior spirit refusing to accept defeat. "We just found you. You don't get to go." But she was so tired. Too tired to fight the pull of the void, too tired to claw her way back to consciousness. The Luna power had demanded too much too fast, and her body simply didn't have the strength to recover. She was dying, and there was nothing anyone could do to stop it. Then she felt something else through the bond, a third presence joining Rhys and Jackson's frantic attempts to reach her. Then a fourth, a fifth, more and more consciousnesses pressing against hers, offering their strength, their energy, their life force. "You're not alone." Abel's voice joined the chorus. "Luna, take what you need. We're here, all of us," Sarah added, her hunter's determination blazing through the connection. 23 wolves offering you their strength. Take it. The bond was expanding, not just the triad connection between her and her mates, but something larger, a web linking her to every wolf who'd chosen to follow her vision. Pack bonds, forming spontaneously in response to her need, fed by Luna power that recognized its purpose was to heal and protect and sustain. This was what she'd been missing. What her power had been trying to tell her all along. Luna power wasn't meant to be wielded alone. It was meant to be shared with pack, to flow through connections and relationships, to grow stronger the more wolves it protected. She'd been trying to do everything herself, heal her mates, fight Damon, manifest her full power, and it had nearly destroyed her, but she wasn't alone anymore. Ember reached for the offered strength and pulled, drawing energy through the newly formed pack bonds. It flowed into her like water filling a reservoir, warm and sustaining, and absolutely right. Her consciousness stabilized, anchored by 23 wolves who refused to let her go. Her eyes opened. She was lying on the ground in the clearing, dawn light painting everything in shades of gold and crimson. Rhys and Jackson were on either side of her, their hands gripping hers so tightly it should have hurt. Around them in a protective circle stood her entire pack, all 23 wolves who'd chosen her, their eyes glowing with power as they fed their strength through the bond. And standing just outside that circle, looking absolutely furious, was Damon. "Impossible," he said, his voice shaking with rage and something that might have been fear. "You should be dead. That much power drain should have killed you." "Pack bonds," Elder Moira said, from somewhere behind him, her voice carrying satisfaction. "True pack bonds formed through choice rather than compulsion. They're sharing their strength with her, sustaining her through the crisis. That's how Luna power is supposed to work. Alpha Blackthorn, not alone, but in concert with wolves who choose to support her." Ember pushed herself to sitting, feeling her mate's steadying hands on her back, feeling the pack bonds humming with vitality. She wasn't just recovered, she was stronger than before. The temporary collapse had forced her power to find a new configuration, a sustainable way to channel Luna energy that didn't burn her out. "How long was I unconscious?" she asked Rhys quietly. 3 minutes, he answered, his voice rough with emotion. 3 minutes of watching you die and not being able to. His voice cracked, and he couldn't finish. "But you did," she said, squeezing his hand. "All of you, you pulled me back." Through the bond she felt their relief flooding back at her, felt the pack bond solidifying into something permanent. These weren't temporary connections formed in crisis. These were real pack bonds. The kind that would last lifetimes. She had a pack. A real pack. 23 wolves bound to her by choice, and Luna power and shared vision. "This changes nothing," Damon said, but there was an edge of desperation in his voice now. "You won your challenge, fine. You have your little rebel pack, but you still have no territory, no council recognition, no legal standing. The moment you try to establish yourselves anywhere, I'll challenge it. I'll make your lives hell until—" "No," Ember interrupted, standing on shaky legs. Her mates rose with her, supporting her without making it obvious she needed support. You won't. And why not? Damon's smile was venomous. What's going to stop me? Because, Elder Moira said, stepping forward with surprising authority for someone so ancient. If you continue this vendetta, I will personally bring charges against you before the Werewolf Council. Charges of mate bond interference, illegal use of Alpha Command, attempted murder of pack members, and violation of challenge terms. Damon's face went pale. You wouldn't? I absolutely would, the Elder said firmly. I've been documenting your abuses for years, Alpha Blackthorn, waiting for someone brave enough to stand against you, for proof that wolves wanted an alternative to your leadership. Ember has given me that proof. 23 wolves chose her vision over yours. That's not a handful of rebels, that's nearly a quarter of your pack. She moved closer to him, and despite her age and his youth, despite his alpha dominance and her lack of rank, Damon actually stepped back. The council takes pack stability seriously, she continued. They're going to ask why so many wolves left under your leadership. They're going to investigate the circumstances of Ember's rejection and exile. They're going to examine your use of Alpha Command, to separate mated pairs. And when they do, her smile was sharp, they're going to find that you've violated more laws than you've upheld. They'll never believe, Damon started. I'll testify, Abel said, stepping forward. I'll tell them everything. The rejected mate bonds, the forced exiles, the wolves who've disappeared under your rule. So will I, Sarah added, and every other wolf in this new pack. We'll make sure the council knows exactly what kind of alpha you've been. More voices joined in, council members who'd come with Elder Moira, even a few Frostfang wolves who'd stayed with Damon but whose expressions suggested they were wavering. The testimony was building, the weight of evidence mounting against him. Damon looked around the clearing with growing panic, seeing his authority crumbling, seeing the foundations of his rule eroding beneath his feet. This is a coup. You're trying to overthrow me. We're trying to hold you accountable, Elder Moira corrected. There's a difference. You can remain Alpha of Frostfang, no one's challenging that. But you'll do it under council supervision. You'll follow pack law properly, and you'll leave Ember's pack alone to develop without your interference. And if I refuse? His voice was barely above a whisper now. Then the council will remove you from Alpha position and appoint someone else, Elder Moira said simply. That's their right when an Alpha proves unfit to lead. So the choice is yours, accept these terms and keep your position, or fight them and lose everything. Silence fell over the clearing. Ember could see Damon's mind racing, calculating odds, weighing options. He was cornered and he knew it. Elder Moira had outmaneuvered him completely. Finally, he spoke. Fine. I'll leave your little experiment alone. But when it fails, and it will fail, don't come crying to Frostfang for help. We won't, Ember said with more confidence than she felt. We'll succeed or fail on our own merits. Damon turned to leave, his remaining Frostfang wolves falling in behind him. But he paused at the edge of the clearing, looking back at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. You have no idea what you've started. The council is going to scrutinize you like never before. Other alphas are going to see your pack as a threat. Rogues are going to test your borders. You think I was your biggest problem? I was just the beginning. Then he was gone, disappearing into the forest with his wolves trailing behind him like a defeated army. Ember waited until she could no longer sense them before letting herself sag against Reese, exhaustion hitting her like a physical weight. Did that really just happen? You faced down an alpha, and won, Jackson said, pride radiating through the bond. You formed a pack from nothing. You survived power drain that should have killed you. Yeah, that really just happened. We survived, she corrected, looking around at the 23 wolves who were now bound to her. All of us together. What happens now? Abel asked, voicing the question everyone was thinking. We have pack bonds. But Damon was right, we have no territory, no resources, no... We have each other, Ember interrupted. And we have Elder Moira's support for council recognition. That's more than most new packs start with. Actually, Elder Moira said, leaning heavily on her walking stick. You have more than that. There's unclaimed territory north of here, forest and mountains, that used to belong to the Silver Creek pack before they dissolved 20 years ago. It's been sitting empty, waiting for the council to assign it to someone worthy. Hope flared in Ember's chest. You think they'd grant it to us? I think, Elder Moira said carefully, that having a Luna-led pack would be politically advantageous for the council right now. There's been growing unrest about alpha supremacy, about the way modern packs have drifted from the old balanced leadership model. You could be the test case they need proof that the old ways still work. Or the cautionary tale about what happens when traditions are abandoned, Rhys added, his tactical mind already seeing the political angles. Either way, you're going to be under intense scrutiny, Elder Moira acknowledged. Every success will be celebrated. Every failure will be magnified. The council will send observers, demand regular reports, watch for any sign that your experiment is failing. Let them watch, Ember said, feeling her wolf rise with determination. We'll show them what Luna-led pack can be, what pack should be. Through the bond, she felt her mate's absolute support, felt the pack bonds thrumming with agreement. These wolves had chosen her vision. Now she had to prove that vision was worth the risk they'd taken. There's something else you should know, Elder Moira said, her expression becoming serious. Your grandmother didn't just leave Frostfang. She tried to start her own pack, much like you're doing now. She found territory, gathered followers, petitioned the council. Ember's heart stuttered. What happened? She succeeded, Elder Moira said simply. For 15 years she led one of the most prosperous packs in the region. Balanced leadership, Luna and Alpha sharing authority. Wolves choosing to join rather than being born into obligation. It was everything pack should be. Then why did it end? Ember asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted to know the answer. Your grandfather died, Elder Moira said gently. He was Alpha of her pack, her mate, the balance to her Luna power. When he passed, she couldn't sustain the pack alone. She was old, tired, and without an Alpha partner to share the burden, the pack dissolved. The wolves scattered to other territories. The words settled over Ember like a blanket of both hope and warning. Her grandmother had done this, had succeeded at building exactly what Ember was attempting, but she'd also lost it all when her mate died. The difference, Elder Moira continued, is that you have two mates, a triad bond. If one of you falls, the other two can sustain the pack. You have redundancy your grandmother didn't have. Stability that comes from 3 wolves sharing leadership instead of 2. Ember looked at Rhys and Jackson, seeing the same realization dawning in their eyes. The triad wasn't just about love or mate bonds. It was about building something sustainable, something that could survive tragedy and keep functioning. We're not just mates, Rhys said slowly, his tactical mind clearly working through implications. We're a leadership triad. Luna, strategist, warrior. 3 different skill sets, 3 different perspectives, all balancing each other. That's why triads are so rare and so powerful, Elder Moira confirmed. They create a stable foundation that's nearly impossible to topple. As long as you 3 stay united, as long as you trust each other and share authority equally, your pack will thrive. And if we don't? Jackson asked. Then you'll fail. Just like every pack that tries to function with imbalanced leadership, Elder Moira said bluntly. The triad only works if all 3 parts are equally valued, equally heard, equally respected. The moment one of you tries to dominate the others, the moment you stop working together, that's when everything falls apart. Through the bond, Ember felt Rhys and Jackson's determination, their commitment to making this work. They'd already proven they'd die for her. Now they had to prove they could live with her, share power with her, trust her judgment, let her lead even when it scared them. We can do this, she said, speaking to her mates but addressing the whole pack. We can build something better. Something that honors the old ways while adapting to new realities. Something that proves pack can function without tyranny, that Luna and Alpha can balance each other, that wolves are stronger when they choose their allegiance, rather than having it forced on them. Pretty words, a voice said from the edge of the clearing, and Ember's hand went instinctively to Rhys's arm as a new wolf emerged from the trees. But this wasn't a Frostfang wolf. The woman who stepped into view was older, maybe 40, with silver-streaked dark hair and eyes that held the kind of wisdom that came from experience rather than age. She wore travel-stained clothes, and moved with the confidence of someone who knew exactly how dangerous she was. "Who are you?" Jackson demanded, his body shifting to put himself between the stranger and Ember. "Relax, warrior," the woman said, holding up her hands in a non-threatening gesture. "I'm not here to fight. I'm here because I heard there's a new Luna-led pack forming, and I wanted to see if the rumors were true." "And?" Ember asked warily. "And you're even younger than I expected," the woman said frankly. "But I felt your power from 5 miles away when you broke that alpha command. That's not beginner-level Luna work. That's the kind of power that builds packs or destroys them, depending on who's wielding it." She took a few steps closer, and Ember felt her mates tense, ready to defend her if necessary. But there was no hostility in the woman's stance, just curiosity, and something that looked almost like hope. "My name is Thea Riversong," she continued. "I was Luna of the Pacific Coast Pack until 3 years ago, when my alpha mate died and I couldn't hold it together alone. I've been wandering since then, looking for, well, I didn't know what I was looking for until I felt your power this morning." She looked directly at Ember. "You're going to need help. Training in Luna powers, guidance on pack management, someone who understands what it's like to carry that kind of responsibility. Your elder friend is right about the old ways. But book knowledge only gets you so far. You need practical experience. And you're offering to provide that?" Reese asked skeptically. "I'm offering to join your pack," Thea corrected. "As advisor, trainer, whatever role you need. I can't be Luna anymore, that power died with my mate bond, but I can teach you how to use yours effectively. How to balance healing with leadership. How to protect your wolves without burning yourself out." Through the bond, Ember felt Reese analyzing the offer, looking for traps or hidden agendas. Felt Jackson's warrior instinct assessing threat level. But she also felt something else, the pack bonds recognizing Thea as potential member, as someone who could strengthen rather than weaken their foundation. "Why would you join us?" Ember asked. "You could join any established pack, have stability and safety. Why risk everything with a group that might not survive its first month?" Thea's smile was sad and knowing. "Because established packs are why I'm alone right now. When my mate died, the council tried to force me to bond with a new alpha of their choosing, said a Luna, without alpha was too valuable to waste on grief. When I refused, they revoked my Luna status and scattered my pack to the winds." Her expression hardened. "The system is broken, Luna Ember. Has been for generations. Alphas have too much power, Lunas have too little, and wolves suffer for it. When I heard about a new Luna building a pack based on balance and choice, I knew I had to find you. Because if you succeed, if you can prove the old ways still work, it could change everything for our kind." Ember looked at Reese and Jackson, having a 3-way conversation through the bond in seconds. "She's experienced, could be invaluable," Reese's analytical mind assessed. "Or she could be a council plant sent to monitor us," Jackson countered. "Or she could be exactly what she claims, a wolf who wants what we want," Ember added. "We said we'd build a pack for wolves who need second chances. She needs one." Through the bond she felt their agreement, their trust in her judgment even when they weren't entirely certain. "You can join us," Ember said aloud. "On one condition, no secrets. If the council sent you to spy, if you're here for any reason other than what you've told us, you tell us now, because we're building this pack on truth and trust. And we can't afford deception from within." Thea met her eyes steadily. "No secrets. I'm here because I believe in what you're trying to do, and because I'm tired of being alone. That's the truth." The pack bonds flickered, and then solidified, accepting Thea into their web of connections. Ember felt the new thread forming not as strong as the bonds with wolves who'd been there from the beginning, but real and growing stronger by the moment. "Welcome to," Ember paused, realizing they didn't even have a name yet. "Welcome to the pack." "You're going to need a name," Elder Moira said, echoing her thought. "Something that reflects your values, your vision, something that tells other wolves what you stand for." Ember looked around at her pack at warriors and healers and council members and hunters, all bound together by choice rather than birth. At Reese and Jackson flanking her, their mate bonds blazing with golden light, at the dawn breaking over the mountains, painting the world in shades of hope and possibility. "Dawnbreak Pack," she said, the name feeling right the moment she spoke it. "Because we're the beginning of something new, the first light after a long darkness, the promise that things can be better. Through the pack bonds she felt agreement, felt wolves accepting the name and making it part of their identity. They were Dawnbreak Pack now, small, new, untested, but alive with potential. Then let it be known, Elder Moira said formally, her voice carrying the weight of ritual. On this day, under Blood Moon's last light and Dawn's first rays, Dawnbreak Pack is born, led by Luna Ember Ashford and her mates Reese and Jackson, 24 wolves strong and growing. May the goddess bless this new beginning. May the goddess bless us. The pack responded in unison, their voices harmonizing in a way that made Ember's eyes burn with unshed tears. They'd done it. Against all odds, against every expectation, they'd actually done it. Built a pack from nothing but hope and determination, and wolves brave enough to choose their own path. Now came the hard part, proving they could sustain it. But as Ember stood surrounded by her mates and her pack, feeling the bonds thrumming with life and purpose, she thought maybe, just maybe, they had a chance. The war with Damon wasn't over. The council's scrutiny hadn't even begun. The challenges ahead were enormous and possibly insurmountable, but they'd face them together, and that made all the difference. Section 10. Resolution. The Silver Creek territory was more beautiful than Ember had dared to hope. They reached it 3 days after the challenge. Guided by Elder Moira's detailed directions and Thea's knowledge of council-held lands, the forest opened up into a valley cradled by mountains, with a clear river running through the center and meadows that would be lush with wildflowers come spring. The old pack den was still standing, a large lodge built into the mountainside, weathered but structurally sound, with enough space for their 24 wolves and room to grow. It's perfect, Ember breathed, standing at the valley's entrance with her mates on either side. It's defensible, Jackson corrected, his warrior's eye already cataloging sightlines and potential weak points. Single main access point, high ground on 3 sides, the river providing natural barrier on the 4th. Any attack would have to come through this entrance, or risk mountain terrain. It has good hunting grounds, Sarah added, the hunter in her assessing different criteria. Deer tracks everywhere, rabbit warrens in the meadow, fish in the river. We won't starve, and the lodge has a root cellar that's still intact, Abel said, returning from his initial scouting. We can store preserved food for winter. There's even an old herb garden that might be salvageable. I could have a proper healing station set up within a week. Through the pack bonds, Ember felt everyone's cautious optimism, their hope beginning to overcome their fear. This could work. This could actually work. First priority is making the lodge livable, Reese said, his strategic mind already organizing tasks. We need sleeping quarters established, windows repaired, fireplaces cleaned. Second priority is territory marking. We need clear boundaries so other packs know where our lands begin. Third priority is defense patrol routes, watch schedules, emergency protocols. What about food? One of the younger wolves asked. We left Frostfang with almost nothing. Hunting party goes out immediately, Ember decided. Sarah, take whoever you need. Bring back enough to feed us for the next few days while we get settled. After that, we'll establish regular hunting rotations. I'll take Abel and show him the medicinal plants that grow in these mountains, Thea offered. Get the healing station operational as fast as possible. We were lucky no one was seriously injured during the exodus, but we need to be prepared. The pack dispersed to their tasks with efficiency that surprised Ember. These weren't random wolves thrown together, they were skilled individuals who'd held important positions in Frostfang. Hunters, healers, council members, warriors. They knew how to work, how to organize, how to get things done. They just needed leadership that trusted them to do it. Come on, Reese said, tugging her toward the lodge. We should inspect the interior, figure out living arrangements. The lodge was larger than it had looked from outside, 3 floors built into the mountain, with a great room that could easily hold their entire pack for gatherings, multiple smaller rooms for privacy, and a kit read that was surprisingly well preserved. Someone had built this place to last, and despite 20 years of abandonment, it had held. Alpha and Luna quarters would traditionally be on the top floor, Jackson said, climbing the stairs with ease. Most defensible position, best sightlines, symbolic leadership placement. The top floor had one large room with windows overlooking the valley, and an attached bathroom that, miraculously, still had plumbing connected to a mountain spring. The bed frame was broken and the mattress long rotted, but the space itself was sound. "We'll need to bring up furniture," Ember said, already mentally cataloging what they'd need to make this livable. "We'll make it work," Rhys assured her, his arm sliding around her waist. "We always do." She leaned into him, feeling Jackson move to her other side, the three of them fitting together like pieces of a puzzle that had finally found their proper configuration. Through the bond, she felt their contentment, their relief at finally having a home, their absolute certainty that this was where they were meant to be. "I'm scared," she admitted quietly. "Scared I'm going to fail them. Scared I don't actually know how to be Luna. Scared that Damon was right, and this whole experiment is going to collapse." "Then we'll be scared together," Jackson said simply. "And we'll figure it out together. That's what mates do. That's what Pack does," Rhys added. "You don't have to carry this alone, Ember. You have us. You have Thea's experience, Abel's wisdom, Sarah's skills. You have 24 wolves who chose to follow you. Use them. Trust them." "Trust you," she corrected, looking between her mates. "I'm still learning how to do that." "We have time," Rhys assured her. "We're not going anywhere." A howl echoed from the valley below, Sarah announcing a successful hunt. Through the pack bonds, Ember felt the ripple of satisfaction, felt wolves responding to the call with anticipation of a meal. Her pack, her responsibility, her family. "Let's go help with dinner," she said, pulling away from her mates with reluctance. "Luna should probably participate in pack activities, right?" "Luna should rest," Jackson countered. "You collapsed 3 days ago from power drain. You're still recovering." "I'm fine," she started, but Rhys cut her off. "You're running on fumes and stubbornness," he said bluntly. "I can feel it through the bond. You need rest, food, and probably about 12 hours of sleep before you'll be fully recovered." She wanted to argue, but through the bond she could feel their genuine concern, could feel that they weren't trying to control her, they were trying to take care of her. That was going to take some getting used to. "Fine," she conceded, "but only if you two stay with me. I don't want to sleep alone anymore." Their expressions softened simultaneously, and through the bond she felt their fierce protectiveness, mixed with something deeper, love, devotion, the absolute commitment that came with true mate bonds. "We'll never make you sleep alone again," Jackson promised, and she believed him. They descended to help organize the evening meal, fresh deer that Sarah's hunting party had brought down, prepared over a fire pit in the lodge's great room. Wolves gathered around the flames, talking and laughing with an ease that hadn't existed in Frostfang. No rigid hierarchy dictating who could sit where, no alpha dominance crushing conversation, just wolves being wolves, sharing food and stories, and the simple pleasure of each other's company. This was what Pack was supposed to be. Ember found herself seated between her mates, their bodies warm against hers as the fire crackled and stars emerged overhead through the holes in the roof that would need repairing. Abel was recounting some ridiculous story about a healing gone wrong, making half the pack laugh until tears streamed down their faces. Thea was teaching some of the younger wolves a traditional pack song, their voices rising in harmony that made something in Ember's chest ache with longing and belonging simultaneously. Through the bonds, she could feel everyone, their contentment, their cautious hope, their determination to make this work. 24 individual consciousnesses all linked through her, all choosing this life, all trusting her to lead them into an uncertain future. It should have felt overwhelming, should have felt terrifying. Instead, it felt right. "You're smiling," Rhys observed quietly, his lips brushing her temple. "Am I?" She hadn't even realized. "First real smile I've seen from you," Jackson added, his hand finding hers beneath the blanket someone had draped over them. "Looks good on you." "I'm happy," she said, surprised to realize it was true. 6 months ago I was alone in a cabin, convinced I'd never trust anyone again, certain that Pack was just another word for prison. And now you have 2 mates who adore you and 22 wolves who'd follow you into hell," Rhys finished. Things change, she agreed, squeezing Jackson's hand while leaning into Rhys's warmth. The evening wound down slowly, wolves dispersing to their chosen sleeping areas as exhaustion finally caught up with the adrenaline of the past few days. Ember let her mates guide her back up to the top floor, to their room that still needed furniture but at least had blankets and pillows scavenged from various sources. They made a nest on the floor, soft furs and thick blankets, creating a makeshift bed that was surprisingly comfortable. Ember settled between them, their bodies forming a protective cocoon that made her feel safer than she'd felt in months. "Thank you," she said quietly into the darkness. "For fighting for me. For not giving up even when I wanted to push you away. For being exactly what I needed even when I didn't know I needed it. Thank you for giving us a chance," Rhys replied, his hand stroking through her hair. "For letting us prove we're not the cowards who hesitated at your spring awakening. For forgiving us even though we didn't deserve it. We'll spend the rest of our lives making it up to you," Jackson added, his arm tightening around her waist, "proving we're worthy of your trust, showing you every day that choosing us wasn't a mistake." Through the bond she felt their sincerity, felt the depth of their commitment. They meant every word. Would dedicate themselves to her happiness, her safety, her well-being for as long as they all lived. "I love you," she said, the words coming easier than expected. "Both of you. I don't know when it happened, maybe it was always there, buried under the pain and fear, but it's there now, and I'm done fighting it." The emotion that flooded through the bond was almost overwhelming, joy and relief and love so intense it stole her breath. They'd been waiting to hear those words, hoping for them, not daring to expect them. "We love you too," they said in unison, their voices harmonizing like they were two parts of the same soul. "Always have. Always will." Rhys kissed her, then slow and deep and thorough, tasting like forever and promise and home. When he finally pulled back, Jackson took his place, his kiss different but equally devastating, carrying the fierce protectiveness of a warrior claiming his mate. By the time they both released her, Ember was breathless and dizzy, and absolutely certain that this, right here, right now, with these two wolves, was exactly where she belonged. "Sleep," Rhys murmured, settling her against his chest while Jackson curved around her back. "We'll be here when you wake up. We'll always be here." She wanted to stay awake, to memorize this moment, to hold on to the feeling of perfect contentment that filled her. But exhaustion was pulling her under, her body finally insisting on the rest it desperately needed. Her last conscious thought was that she'd found what she'd been searching for, not just mates or pack or territory, but belonging, the kind of deep, soul-level belonging that came from being seen and chosen and loved for exactly who you were. She'd been rejected, exiled, broken, but she'd also been healed, claimed, made whole, and that made all the difference. Through the bond she felt her mate's consciousness settling into sleep alongside hers, their wolves curling protectively around her own. Downstairs, she could sense the pack bonds, 22 other wolves sleeping peacefully, under her protection, trusting her to keep them safe. She wouldn't fail them, wouldn't let them down, would build the pack they deserved, the one that honored the old ways while forging a new path forward. Tomorrow would bring challenges. The council petition, territorial defense, the 1,000 small crises that came with starting a pack from scratch. But tonight, she had everything she needed: her mates, her pack, her home, and the absolute certainty that together, they could face whatever came next. Ember Ashford rejected Omega turned Luna. Exile turned pack leader finally let herself rest. She'd earned it. If Ember's journey from broken Omega to powerful Luna touched something deep in your soul, subscribe, because stories like this die in silence when viewers don't speak up. She fought through rejection, exile, and attempted murder to find her happy ending. All I'm asking is that you fight through the algorithm by hitting like and comment. Don't let her story fade into the void when it could save someone else who feels worthless right now. Epilogue. 3 months later, Ember stood at the edge of the valley, watching the sun rise over Dawnbreak Pack territory with a sense of contentment that still surprised her some mornings. 3 months. It had only been 3 months since that blood moon night, when everything changed, and yet it felt like a lifetime ago. The lodge behind her was fully restored now, roof repaired, windows replaced, every room occupied and filled with life. Smoke rose from the chimneys as the early risers prepared breakfast for the pack. She could hear laughter drifting from the great room, could sense through the pack bonds that Abel was already in his healing station, treating a hunter who'd twisted his ankle during last night's patrol. They'd grown, not just in repairs and infrastructure, but in numbers. Word had spread about the Luna-led pack that honored the old ways, and wolves had started arriving first in ones and twos, then in small family groups. Exiles from other packs, lone wolves tired of wandering, even a few wolves from Frostfang who decided they preferred Ember's leadership to Damon's. They were 43 wolves strong now, with more inquiries coming in weekly. The council had granted their petition for territorial recognition 6 weeks ago, after extensive investigation and interviews. Ember still remembered the council representative's surprise when he'd arrived, expecting chaos, and found instead a thriving, organized pack with clear leadership structure and happy, healthy wolves. "We'll be monitoring your progress closely," he'd said, making it sound like a threat. But Ember had just smiled and invited him to stay for dinner, letting him see firsthand how pack was supposed to function. He'd left 3 days later with a glowing report and a promise to recommend Dawnbreak as a model for other new packs. "You're up early," Reese said, emerging from the lodge with 2 mugs of tea. He handed her one and settled beside her, his shoulder pressed against hers in the comfortable intimacy they'd developed over months of sleeping tangled together. "Couldn't sleep," she admitted. Sipping the perfectly prepared tea, he knew exactly how she liked it now. "Too much thinking." "About?" His tactical mind was already running through potential problems, threats, concerns, about how different everything is. She said, 3 months ago I was alone in a cabin, convinced I'd never trust anyone again. Now I have a pack, a territory, 2 mates who know how I take my tea without asking. 2 mates who love you," Reese corrected, his arm sliding around her waist. "Don't forget that part." She leaned into him, feeling the mate bond humming contentedly between them. "I could never forget." Jackson emerged from the lodge a few minutes later, his hair still damp from showering, carrying his own mug and a thick blanket. "It's freezing out here. What are you 2 doing?" "Watching the sunrise," Ember said. "Come join us." He wrapped the blanket around all 3 of them and settled on her other side, his presence solid and warm. Through the bond she felt both of them, Reese's quiet contentment, Jackson's fierce protectiveness, both of their absolute devotion to her and to the pack they'd built together. "Patrol report came in," Jackson said after a moment. "No threats detected. Frostfang is staying on their side of the border. The rogue pack that was testing our defenses last week has moved on." "Good." Ember took another sip of tea, letting the warmth spread through her. "Thea says she wants to start advanced Luna training today. Something about channeling power through pack bonds without burning myself out." "You've gotten much better at that," Reese observed. "The collapse after the challenge hasn't repeated." "Because I learned to share the burden," she said. "Stop trying to do everything alone. Let the pack support me instead of trying to protect them single-handedly." "Character growth," Jackson said solemnly. "Very impressive." She elbowed him, making him laugh, and through the bond felt Reese's amusement at their playfulness. This was what she'd been missing, not just safety or belonging, but joy. The simple pleasure of being with wolves who knew her completely and loved her anyway. "The council representative is coming back next month," Reese said, his strategic mind never fully turning off. "He wants to see our progress, interview new pack members. It's routine, but we need to make sure everything is perfect," Ember finished. "I know. We'll be ready." "We're always ready," Jackson said confidently. "We have the best Luna in the region." "Only Luna in the region," she corrected. "Still the best," he insisted, pressing a kiss to her temple. Through the pack bonds, Ember felt the territory waking up, wolves emerging from the lodge, morning patrols heading out, the younger wolves gathering for training with Sarah, her pack, her family, all of them choosing to be here, choosing this life, choosing her leadership. She still had moments of doubt. Still sometimes woke up terrified that she was making all the wrong decisions, that she'd lead them all into disaster. But those moments came less frequently now, buffered by Reese's tactical wisdom and Jackson's warrior confidence, and the pack bonds that reminded her constantly that she wasn't alone in this. "Abel mentioned something yesterday," Reese said carefully, in that tone that meant he was broaching a sensitive topic. "He said he's been noticing changes in your scent." Asked if we'd considered the possibility that, he trailed off, but Ember knew what he was trying to say. She'd noticed it too. The subtle shifts in her body, the way the mate bond had been fluctuating, the strange flutter she sometimes felt low in her abdomen that could have been anxiety or could have been something else entirely. "I'm pregnant," she said quietly, speaking the truth she'd been avoiding for the past week. "At least, I'm pretty sure I am. The signs are all there." Both of her mates went completely still. Jackson's voice came out strangled. "We're going to be fathers?" Apparently. She'd meant to tell them differently, more formally, with some kind of romantic presentation. But sitting here watching the sunrise with them felt more right than any planned announcement. "Multiple heartbeats," Rhys said, his hand sliding down to rest on her still flat stomach. Through the bond she felt his consciousness reaching out, his wolf sensing what his human mind was confirming. "Twins. You're carrying twins." "Of course she is," Jackson said, his voice thick with emotion, "because nothing with us is ever simple." Through the bond, Ember felt their reactions flooding into her, shock and joy and terror and fierce protectiveness all tangled together. They were going to be fathers. She was going to be a mother. They were bringing new life into a pack that was barely 3 months old, adding vulnerability and responsibility to an already complicated situation. It should have terrified her. Instead, it felt right. "I'm scared," she admitted. "Scared. I won't know how to be a mother. Scared of what this means for the pack. Scared that, we'll figure it out," Rhys interrupted gently. "Just like we've figured out everything else. Together. Our children will grow up in a pack that actually values them," Jackson added, "where they're protected and loved and free to become whoever they're meant to be. What could be better than that? They'll grow up with 2 fathers who adore their mother," Rhys said, his hand still resting on her stomach. "And a pack full of wolves who'll help raise them. They'll have everything we didn't balance: choice, freedom." Ember felt tears burning behind her eyes, not sad tears, but the overwhelming emotion of having something precious you didn't know you wanted until it was offered. She'd spent so long focused on survival, on building the pack, on proving herself as Luna, that she hadn't let herself think about the future beyond the next crisis. But there was a future now. A real future, with children and grandchildren and generations of dawnbreak wolves growing up in a pack that honored the old ways while forging new traditions. "We're going to need a bigger lodge," she said, laughing through her tears. "We're going to need a lot of things." Rhys agreed, his tactical mind already making lists. Nursery, extra security, protocols for protecting pregnant Luna. "Later," Ember interrupted. "We'll plan everything later. Right now I just want to sit here with you and watch the sun rise over our territory and feel happy without worrying about what comes next." Both mates settled closer, their arms wrapping around her protectively, their wolves radiating contentment through the bond. Around them, Dawnbreak Pack was coming to life. Wolves training and hunting and healing, and simply being together in the way Pack was meant to be. Ember had been rejected, exiled, told she was worthless, but she'd also been claimed, chosen, made into something stronger than she'd ever imagined possible. From Omega to Luna. From exile to pack leader. From broken and alone to mated and surrounded by family. And now, from warrior to mother. The journey had been brutal. The pain had been real. The scars would never fully fade. But sitting here between her mates, feeling their children growing inside her, sensing her pack through the bonds that tied them all together, Ember couldn't bring herself to regret any of it, because every moment of suffering had led her here. To this pack. These mates. This future. And that made it all worthwhile. The sun crested the mountains, painting the valley in shades of gold and amber and rose. Dawnbreak, living up to its name. The first light after darkness. The promise that things could be better. Ember closed her eyes, and let herself simply feel the warmth of her mates, the strength of pack bonds, the flutter of new life, the absolute certainty that she was exactly where she belonged. She'd found her home, and she was never letting it go. Section 12. CTA Close. From outcast to Luna. From rejected and broken to claimed and whole. From sleeping alone in a cabin warded against the world to waking up surrounded by mates who worship her and a pack that chose to follow her vision, Ember Ashford's journey started with a rejection that should have destroyed her. Instead, it freed her to become something greater than anyone, including herself, had imagined possible. She learned that true strength isn't about dominance or control, but about the courage to be vulnerable, to trust again after betrayal, to build something new when the old systems fail. The frozen wolves who begged entry to her cabin that blood moon night weren't just seeking shelter from the cold. They were seeking redemption, a second chance to claim the mate they should have fought for from the beginning. And in opening her door to them, in choosing connection over safety, love over fear, Ember didn't just save their lives, she saved her own soul. Dawnbreak Pack stands now as proof that the old ways still work, that Luna and Alpha can balance each other, that wolves are stronger when they choose their allegiance rather than having it forced upon them. It's not perfect, nothing ever is, but it's real, built on foundations of trust and choice, and the kind of love that survives rejection and exile and everything the world throws at it. So here's a question for you. Would you have opened the door that night? Would you have let in the wolves who watched you be destroyed, even knowing they might be your salvation? Would you have been brave enough to trust again after having your heart shattered? Would you have chosen the terrifying freedom of building something new over the familiar pain of staying broken? Think about it. Because we all have doors we could open, chances we could take, possibilities we reject out of fear. If you loved Ember's journey from rejected Omega to powerful Luna, smash that like button and let me know in the comments. What was your favorite moment? The confrontation with Damon? The mate bond snapping into place? The moment Ember claimed her power and refused to submit? Don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss another story of supernatural romance. Powerful heroines claiming their destiny, and mates who'll move heaven and earth for the wolves they love. Coming up next, the rogue Alpha crashed my wedding, then claimed I'm his fated mate. You won't believe what happens when a wolf bride discovers her arranged marriage was designed to hide a prophecy that could destroy 3 packs. The twist ending will leave you screaming. Until then, remember, sometimes the worst thing that happens to you is actually the best thing in disguise. Sometimes rejection is just the universe clearing space for something better. And sometimes the wolves who beg to enter your sanctuary are exactly the ones you need to finally feel at home. This is your Luna, signing off. May your bonds be true, and your pack be chosen.